On one ordinary day, the Heavenly Demon Cult Monastery was in perfect harmony. The patriarch of the Heavenly Demon Cult, called Heavenly Demon, was performing one of his rituals. Suddenly, someone burst into the room and crawled on all fours towards the patriarch, shouting in an indignant voice, "Hyun Nim." It turns out to be the first elder of the monastic order, called Demon Fist. He tells the patriarch that all 9 sects, orthodox and unorthodox, have already been subjugated, and with tears and despair in his eyes, asks the patriarch why he does not act. Demon Fist does not understand how to be, because the fact that the patriarch is a famous master is not enough. With indignation and anger, the patriarch turned to Demon Fist and told him not to talk nonsense. The patriarch recalled that once while practicing the divine arts, his soul and body had split, and he could not return to his body. Blurred in illusions, he remembers how fun it was at first. You could fly to the moon if you wanted to. But he is interrupted by the cries of the Demon Fist, who claims that the patriarch doesn't care about the monastery. Fury gripped the patriarch, his eyes glazed with anger. He ordered him to stop bellowing immediately. The patriarch tried to punch the Demon Fist, but no matter how much of a master of divine arts he was, without a physical body, he couldn't strike. But suddenly, some kind of black cloud formed and began to pull the patriarch in. He doesn't understand what kind of force is pulling him in so irresistibly. The patriarch decides to apply the magic technique of rock gravity, which increases the mass of the body to 6 tons. But naturally, it is unsuccessful, because without a physical body the spell does not work. A black cloud of irresistible force pulled the patriarch in, and only ashes remained of him. Falling into the black hole of this cloud, the patriarch began to hear the words of criticism of some people. They argued that anyone can support better, that he is just a commoner and he does not have any superpowers. Suddenly, it was loud and clear that someone shouted, "Hansu." In a cold sweat, the frightened Hansu opened his eyes and screamed very loudly. He tried to come to his senses, got up from the bed and said that he was very tired of all this. 2 years ago, portals to other worlds opened simultaneously all over the earth. Monsters came out of those portals by the hundreds, destroying everything and everyone in their path. Mankind went on the counterattack with the best weapons of their time. However, modern weaponry was useless against the monsters. Mankind was in danger of total annihilation. And then people began to awaken superpowers, thanks to which they managed to keep the defense. Among them stood out the S-class hunters, who awakened abilities of the highest power. Their weapons were very effective against monsters. When the war ended in victory, the S-class hunters gained unlimited power over all living things. But what became of the 1% of people without superpowers, the so-called commoners? Hansu is among that 1% of people. He is a commoner. Suddenly, after a nightmare, Hansu receives a text message on his phone saying that the hospital has a severe shortage of beds, and that he has to pay a debt or they will have to discharge Hyundai. He realizes that discharging Hyundai means condemning him to a painful death and decides to commit suicide. It's better to die than to see the last person he loves die in agony, Hyun-soo thinks. He realizes that if Hyundai doesn't have a guardian, the state will be able to take better care of him. Despair overcame Hyun-soo. A black cloud appears in front of him, spinning like a funnel at an incredible speed. The cloud was getting closer and closer. Hyun-soo didn't realize what it was and started calling for help. The patriarch, called the Heavenly Demon, comes out of the cloud and falls right on top of Hyun-soo. Hyung-soo is completely bewildered and with fear in his eyes. He asks who he is and what he is doing here. The patriarch is shocked and asks Hyun-soo if he can see him. Hyun-soo leans back and starts yelling at him to get out because he has nothing to steal and nothing of value. The patriarch started floating in the air and asked where he was. Hyun-soo was almost speechless at what he saw. He asked the patriarch if he was a hunter, to which the patriarch asked in surprise who were hunters, and then the patriarch saw a TV set. He thought it was a wonderful painted lantern. He decided to poke at it with his fingers, but fell through it with his whole hand. It turns out the patriarch is still incorporeal. From what he saw, Hyun-soo assumed that the patriarch was a death ghost who had come for him, and began to shout that he had changed his mind, asking to be spared, because he had to take care of his brother. The patriarch was angered by such statements. First he imagines him a thief, now a ghost of death, and from anger showed him the middle finger. The patriarch realizes that he can touch Hansu, and Hansu still feels like he's about to hit him. The patriarch wonders how this is even possible and sneaks out the door to think it over. He found himself on a crowded city street and began to float quietly, immersing himself in his thoughts. However, the patriarch's concentration was interrupted by interesting things. And the people here ride on horseless carriages, fast carriages, he thought, and he had never seen such unusual houses in his life. If all this is a reality, to make sure of the reality of what was happening, the patriarch tried to stop a guy walking by. However, he just passed through him. The patriarch realized that he was only material to Hansu and decided it was time for him to go home. Hansu tries anything to seal up this black hole that's still spinning in his room. And then he realizes that it's probably a portal and it's the right thing to report it to the authorities. However, Hansu gets a call on his phone. It's Hunter Kim. He asks Hansu for help because there's some kind of emergency at the portal. A thrilled and totally happy Hansu is ready to go to the B-class portal to help. He can't believe it. Did he really get a call from Hunter Kim himself asking for help? Now he has clearly realized that death is not an option at all. Suddenly, a voice comes from behind Hansu's back. It is the patriarch, who says that in his land it is not customary to talk to oneself, as they are considered fools. The furious Hansu doesn't realize that this old man has forgotten the ghost in his room. The patriarch explains that he tried to leave, but some unknown force stopped him, and the patriarch did not really want to return to this shabby hut. Hansu decided to deal with all this later, because now the most important thing is to get to the portal and help people. He asked the patriarch to find another place to live. The patriarch asked him what kind of portals and hunters he was talking about. Hansu was shocked at what he had heard. How could he not know what a portal was? However, Hansu didn't have time to explain all of this and warned the patriarch that if he didn't get out of his apartment, he would call the police. The patriarch decided to help Hansu, as he couldn't be late for something as important as this, so he used the heavenly demon wing spell. Hansu began to float above the ground like a bird. The passers-by were completely confused about who he was and where he was flying to, but his emotions were not positive at all. He asked the patriarch to stop because people were watching. As he flew over the right place, Hansu asked him to immediately lower him to the ground. The patriarch did so. The landing was not soft at all, and Hansu vomited from the flight. When he came to, Hansu got on the bus with the others, and then he began to have thoughts. Class B portals are dangerous and he could die there. But on the other hand, if he survived, he would have enough money to pay his hospital debts. Again, the patriarch appears from somewhere, this time jumping out of the roof of the bus. A frightened Hansu yells loudly. He doesn't understand why this ghost is chasing him, but the patriarch explains that every time he tries to leave, some force stops him. Hansu just goes crazy. His thoughts are filled with only what this old man wants and how long he will haunt him. Finally, the bus arrives at the mountain at the top of which a portal has opened. The hunters are almost there. The sapwarts were given a piece of equipment each, and they moved out. The equipment was quite heavy, making it a bit of a challenge to carry it to the portal. Upon reaching the portal, Hunter Kim introduced himself and said that he was in charge of the operation. 1 B-class hunter, 4 C-class hunters, and 5 sapwarts are heading to the portal for reconnaissance. One of the B-class hunters named Iron decided to give a briefing and reminded the battle-hardened ones to keep an eye on the newbies. It was time to check out the gear. After Iron's briefing, many of the sapwarts were discussing how awesome she was. Hansu also volunteered to be a sapwarter just to see her. At this time, someone from the back approaches Hansu and says that it's been a while since they've seen each other. It's B-class hunter Jun-sun, and he can't believe his eyes that Hansu is still a sapwarter. He doesn't understand what he's doing here, especially after what he did in the last operation. Hansu isn't happy with him because he knows how horny Jun-sun is, beating people up left and right. He purposely provokes people by pretending he's just joking around, and once he put Hansu out of commission for a month for nothing. Jun-sun takes a swing at Hansu and says you could have said hello. Without hiding his hatred, Jun-sun intimidated Hansu and asked who called him. Hyun said Hunter Kim called him. Jun-sun slapped him and asked him to try not to be like last time today. At this time, the patriarch came up to Hansu and expressed his displeasure about Jun-sun's behavior. Hansu replied that he is always making trouble and blaming it on others. But then the patriarch hits Hansu too, He doesn't understand why the patriarch cracked him, and everyone around him thought that Hansu had gone crazy and was fighting with himself. Suddenly, an announcement was made that the operation was starting. Everyone was asked to gather at the portal and prepare for the infiltration. The patriarch is also present among the hunters and sapports. His interest in the operation and unknown power keep him at home. Even experienced hunters feel discomfort when entering the portal. The patriarch wondered if he could experience such feelings. Finally crossed the portal. But what is this dried-up earth? Hansu asked the patriarch. Hunter Kim began to give commands to his subordinates to prepare for the operation and realize what kind of world they are dealing with. At this time, the patriarch tells Hansu to go forward himself and scout the area. However, Hansu persists and says that they can't do anything without orders. The patriarch mocks him and says he's just a servant porter who can't even take a step back. Hansu had nothing to object to. However, the patriarch shared with him his observations about this land. On the surface, it is a desert, but there is some movement of underground water. Then Hansu hears that the hunters were able to find out that the essence of this world is water. So the patriarch was right. At this time, Jun's son walks over to the measuring device and says that it's all nonsense. Suddenly, water began to appear at his feet. The stream was getting stronger and stronger, and soon reached the height of Junsung. Soon there were more and more of these jets, and the Earth's crust was breaking up into small islands. And then they appeared, the attackers. They turned out to be mermaids. Amidst all the commotion, orders were heard to keep the newcomers close to the hunters. The mermaids did not spare anyone in their path. Their burning eyes and huge fangs literally caused only fear. Hansu didn't understand how this was possible, because usually there was a safe zone at the entrance to the portal. But now, even the B-class hunters can barely cope. Just then, the order came for Hansu to immediately give his spear to Hunter Kim. Suddenly, Hansu is attacked by one of those monsters. Fear overcame him so much that he couldn't move. The mermaid's harpoon pierced through his body armor like a simple cloth. But Hansu shouldn't relax because the mermaid was preparing his next strike. This time, it was obvious that Hansu had no chance. This monster with flaming eyes would tear him apart. But suddenly, something saves Hansu. Some inexplicable force prevents the mermaid from killing him. Of course, it's the patriarch. He had to use the Heavenly Demon King's strike. And as it turns out, he can fight monsters. However, even in this situation, the patriarch's irony was not lost on him. It has come to this. To fight with some fish humans, says he to himself. The enraged mermaid will not just leave it like that. His main task was to destroy the patriarch at all costs. But no matter how hard he tried, all his blows missed the patriarch. Little more years for 1,000 years, the patriarch turned to Ruzel. To inflict at least a scratch, he must try very hard. The patriarch destroyed one by one, each of them wanting to avenge their brothers, but their strength was nothing compared to his strength. The mermaids are just a parody of the human form, and it's disgusting, the patriarch shouted. He used a flash of chaos that annihilated all the opponents 45 meters in direction. And then Jun's son sees that all this carnage is happening in Hansu's field, but he doesn't understand how it's possible because he's just a commoner, just a normal sapport. Suddenly, a mermaid crawls out from under the crust of the earth, several times larger than the others, its eyes and fangs even more frightening. This must be the fish prince, the patriarch suggests, and decides to bestow upon him the honor of dying by the hand of a true master. The patriarch gathers all his strength and incredible power within himself to strike. But what happens? All the patriarch's energy has gone somewhere. He's fallen through the monsters as if he doesn't exist. He's powerless. After leaking through the patriarch, the monster reaches Hansu. Death has never been so close to him before. Hansu makes the bravest and most courageous decision at that moment. He puts up a block and barely defends himself from the mermaid's strike. But Hansu has no more strength left, not enough to block another blow. At that moment, the patriarch appears and reminds Hansu that if he doesn't get up right away, he'll die. Ruzel wastes no time. He only has one goal in front of him, to destroy Hansu. The patriarch yells with all his might for Hansu to get up immediately. The patriarch tells him to look closely at this monster. The mermaid only looks strong. It actually has thin bones. The patriarch points out Ruzel's weak spot. He draws Hansu's attention to the monster's collarbone. it's sticking out and it won't be hard to break. With a kick in the ass, the patriarch pushes Hansu forward so that he can fight with dignity and overpower Ruzal. However, Hansu doesn't have the courage for this battle and fear overcomes him. But then the patriarch's words and instructions appear in his mind, and he remembers Ruzal's weaknesses and gathers all his strength into a fist. Hansu realizes he has no choice but to strike at Ruzal's collarbone. Hansu can't believe that he was able to knock Ruzal out with his own hands, but the fight isn't over. The patriarch tells Hansu not to stand there, but to take his spear and finish the monster. Hansu has only killed small slug monsters before and doesn't understand how he can finish Ruzal with this spear. While Hansu was gathering his thoughts, the patriarch reminded him that if he didn't kill the monster would kill everyone around him. It was necessary to act immediately because the hunters and sapworts were already barely fighting off the rest of the mermaids. And then Hansu realized that he remembered all the events of his past. Because of such monsters, his parents died in a car accident and his brother is now in the hospital. Gathering all his pain, anger, and resentment, Hansu finally strikes. His heart is saturated with hatred, and he destroys the monster. Suddenly a miracle happens. Hansu has overcome his fear. He becomes awakened. He is now empowered. Hansu can't believe his eyes. It's really an awakening. He's been waiting for this moment for so long. His stats appear in front of him, but what does he see? He is endowed with a unique ability to follow clues. This superpower makes him furious and nothing more. He doesn't understand how he managed to awaken such a worthless superpower. Meanwhile, the hunters and sapworts are recovering from the battle. No one realizes how such monsters could have appeared in a B-class portal. Suddenly a hunter comes running up and shouts for everyone to leave immediately. Reconnaissance has failed, and it turns out that this is not a B-class portal at all, but a top-class portal. Iron decides to take matters into her own hands. She tells everyone to retreat immediately, and for everyone who is still standing to help the wounded. After this battle, there are so many wounded. No one expected that they will be in hell, and such strong monsters in this portal. Hansu can't come to his senses. It's the first time he's been in such a dangerous situation. Suddenly, Jun-sun comes up to him and says that they need to talk urgently when they get back from the portal. Hyunsu's first thought was that he wants to punish him again and vent his hatred. Everyone headed for the portal, some of them carrying several injured people on their backs. Hyunsu couldn't understand what he had done to deserve a reprimand. After crossing the portal, there was a moment of silence in honor of all those who had died in this difficult battle. While the others couldn't hold back tears and regret for what had happened, Jun-sung's only concern was that the association would surely pin the incident on them as their senior officers. And at that moment, they announced the news that despite all the pain and loss, there is one awakened person among them. Hyunsu doesn't understand how they found out, and now it's clear what Jun-sun wanted to talk to him about. After all the commotion, they were told to pack up all the equipment since it is the property of the association. While Hyunsu is busy packing the equipment, Jung-sun comes up to him and tells him not to get too excited. Jun-sun gives him a supposedly friendly slap and tells him to brag to everyone about his superpower. This is noticed by the people around him, and everyone realizes that Jung-seon is once again prying into Sapwort's mind. But some people are also curious about Hyunsu's superpower. Hyunsu doesn't really want to share the news about his superpower, but he still says the first word of the superpower name. He says following. Jun-sun immediately picks it up and continues. Following the clues. He can't contain his laughter and starts mocking Hyunsu. Everyone around him also heard about Hyunsu's superpower and doesn't hesitate to start laughing loudly and scorn the guy. Hyunsu felt like a real laughingstock. Suddenly, the patriarch appeared and asked him if he was embarrassed about his superpower of following cues. Jung-seon noticed that the boy was talking to himself and ironically asked him if he had gone crazy after waking up. And then Jun-sung decides to put Hyunsu's superpowers to the test. He takes a swing at the guy, and immediately his superpower of following clues is activated. The patriarch appears behind Hyunsu's back and tells him to take a step back. Hyunsu complies. Jung-sun tries to throw punches but misses every time. He starts swinging harder out of anger and rage. At this time, he receives a notification that his ability to follow directions has been successfully applied and Hyunsu's attack power is increased by 15%. This news makes Jun-sun even more mad, and he gathers all his strength against Hansu. Hansu follows the patriarch's instructions as if they were one whole organism. Their thoughts are merged together. The patriarch tells him to use the tiger crouch left technique and lightning right punch. The new technique for Hansu seems to be written directly into his memory. Everything around him freezes, and there seems to be no one around but his target. Hansu confidently uses the new technique against Junsun and stuns him to death. The people around him are shocked by what they see. Hansu manages to take Junsung down with one punch. Jungseon doesn't understand how this is possible since he only woke up a couple hours ago. While the paramedics are being called for the victim, Hansu can't understand how he knocked him out with one punch. At this time, one of the hunters comes up to him and tells him that the use of force against a colleague is strictly forbidden. But the hunter is impressed by his skills and turns a blind eye to it for the first time, promising to put in a good word with the association for Hansu. Everyone's thrilled that this guy was able to knock out Jungsun. And then that same Jaren comes up to him and says she hopes to work together in the future. Hansu's heart was pounding at an unbelievable rate. Suddenly, the patriarch comes up to him and asks him if he likes this maiden. Hansu started to deny it, but he had one request for the old man that he couldn't pronounce. The patriarch told him to hurry up because he wouldn't claw everything out of him. Suddenly, Hansu fell to his knees and asked to be his disciple. The patriarch's response shocked Hansu. He was angry and saddened at the same time. The patriarch answered him that he just didn't want to. In his defense, the patriarch only said that he doesn't take anyone as a disciple. If he takes on someone to babysit, he won't have time to practice martial arts. To which Hansu asked, "What's the point of practicing martial arts if the patriarch is incorporeal anyway?" Hansu also reminded the patriarch that he himself had said how bored he was. These words made the patriarch more and more mad. And the last straw that pissed the patriarch off was Hansu saying that if he died, the patriarch wouldn't be able to go back to where he came from. However, the patriarch was able to hold back his anger because there was some truth in Hansu's words. Then the patriarch asked the boy if he would be able to travel freely if he became a hunter. Hansu asked the patriarch what he meant. Did he mean traveling in all worlds? That's exactly what the patriarch meant. Then Hansu explained to him that if he reached the A grade, then he could go wherever he wanted. And if he reached the S grade, then Hansu would be untouchable. Does that mean no one can challenge you? The patriarch asked. In that case, the patriarch himself is untouchable. The patriarch told Hansu to go through the ritual of 9 bows. The boy was stunned because he had no idea what the ritual was. Then the master shrieked at him and said that he was going to be his teacher, so he should bow 9 times immediately. However, Hansu was stopped more by the number of people around him because they would think he had lost his mind. "It's now or never," shouted the patriarch. Hansu immediately began to obey the order and bowed 9 times. The people around him were completely confused as to what was going on. Huntress Iron also noticed what was going on and asked her colleague if this kid's head was okay. After this busy day, Hansu finally returns home. But as soon as he enters his room, the patriarch tells him to clean his room immediately because his student can't live in a pigsty. Of course, Hansu didn't disobey his teacher and started cleaning his room. But it wasn't easy to please the patriarch. And then the patriarch noticed that there was paper pasted on the wall and asked Hansu why he did it. Then the guy explained that it was him who taped up the portal from which the patriarch came. Without thinking for a long time, the master was about to cross the portal. And of course, he brought Hansu with him. As soon as they crossed the portal, Hansu felt nothing but emptiness. There was nothing around but emptiness. Then the patriarch told him that this was a great place to go through the trials of life and death. Such statements made Hansu feel scared. The master ordered the boy to take off his shirt and sit down, but he began to resist. The patriarch shouted at him not to cross his master. When Hansu complied with the patriarch's instructions, he explained to him that he was adjusting the flow of his meridians and energy nodes. Pure energy was necessary before learning martial arts. The sensation was not pleasant, but the patriarch warned Hansu that if it was too much for him, then learning the art would be all the more unbearable for him. The patriarch crumpled the kid's body like plasticine in his hands. However, in his thoughts he recognized that he had not met such a healthy body for a long time. Finally, the master finished and asked Hansu how he felt. Hansu told him that he was almost dead, and he would have died a little more. The master concluded that Hansu's body was perfect for martial arts, but these were times that martial arts were being neglected. So they went back into the portal. As soon as they got home, Hansu immediately said that he felt incredibly light. His fatigue was gone. It was because the patriarch had cleaned his blocked chakras. Now Hansu felt nothing but lightness. Hansu can't get enough of this airiness. He says he can fly. And then he crashes into the ceiling. Suddenly, the patriarch says he forgot to tell him that he shared his heavenly demon skill energy with him. But how so? Hansu doesn't understand. The patriarch says he's shocked that it all worked out, and how Hansu survived it all is unbelievable. The guy's stunned. Hansu yells at the patriarch that he's crazy and almost killed him. This angered the teacher, and he decided to teach him a lesson so that he would not raise his voice and know his place. The patriarch threw him several times. The master explained to him that if Hansu couldn't withstand even a particle of his divine energy, he wouldn't even be able to begin his training. What Hansu had learned from the patriarch yesterday was the only technique available to mortals. It was morning, and Hansu and his teacher headed to the association because the hunter had promised to put in a good word about him. Shyly, and with a bit of trepidation, Hansu approached the girl at the front desk to tell her that the hunter had signed him up for an evaluation. And what was his surprise when the girl said they were already looking forward to seeing him and asked him to take selfies with him. The girl told him to go down to the 5th underground floor and find the assessment department there. Also, he needs to go to the chief appraiser Naksu. Hansu was shaking with excitement. He didn't know what awaited him. The patriarch told him not to chicken out and reminded him that he must gain knowledge to be his disciple. As soon as Hansu got to the right floor, he was surprised by a strange sound. Heard someone shouting, "Great shot." Some guy is admiring the punch of the girl who knocked out 687 units. She claims she can do more. The head appraiser Naksu is watching all this. He says that this girl is a B-class hunter and she is not ready to take a hit over 900 units yet. This is very frustrating for the girl. She is definitely confident in her abilities and was able to take a hit for more units. Suddenly, the appraiser notices Hansu. He is very happy about his arrival and asks to go inside. Not only the receptionist and the appraiser were happy about Hansu's arrival, but also everyone who saw Hansu on their way in. Everyone wanted to talk to him and say hello. The appraiser told him that rumors had spread about how Hansu had put Jun-sun in his place. Then the guy immediately understood the behavior of the people around him. Suddenly, a girl came up and asked if the testing would continue. Then the head evaluator sent his assistant Kim to test the girl, while Hansu took care of Hansu. While Hansu was following the evaluator, he crossed paths with this cute girl on the way. The patriarch asked Hansu what his unhealthy fear of women was, to which the man replied that he doesn't have any fear. While the girl was on her way to the testing, she asked the assistant if Hansu was definitely an awakened person. The assistant confidently said yes. Then the girl got excited and said that it was probably her future colleague and they would meet again in battle. Hansu changed into his overalls, which the patriarch didn't like at all. He said it was better to wear what he wore instead of this. Finally, Hansu started the test. The patriarch advised him to draw energy from the technique he learned yesterday thanks to the teacher. At that time, Hansu gathered all of his power to unleash an incredible punch for a large number of units. He felt all the power he felt during the battle with the mermaid. And then the scoreboard showed 1120 units. The emotion on the appraiser's face can't be conveyed in words. He literally screamed. Hansu can't believe his eyes. He can't believe he beat that score. That girl had only knocked out 700 units. He used the lightning strike he used yesterday. But the power is incomparable. That's what gives you energy control. The appraiser is shouting, "Unbelievable." Hansu is an A-class warrior. Their punches reach 900-1500 units. Only Class S is higher. Then Hansu asked for another hit, and this time he broke the shield. The appraiser thought that if Hansu had hit Jun-sun with the same force, the latter would already be dead. Hansu demanded another punch, but the appraiser said they didn't have any more spare shields, so not today. Hansu then suggested moving on to the next test. Next up was the testing of leg kicks. This time Hansu kicks out 1,377 units. Too bad, the evaluator says he's still a little short of the S-class. Hansu couldn't be more proud of himself, but the patriarch wasn't happy with his result. He said that if Hansu had concentrated his energy faster, he would have beaten 1,500 units long ago. Hansu went to the next running speed test, and the evaluator confidently told him that Hansu had a stable A grade. The evaluator also told him that he would be able to take the most important battle stimulation test in the afternoon. In the meantime, Hansu headed to the dining room. There he saw the ramyun. Its price in the market had skyrocketed after the factories were destroyed, and he couldn't even look in its direction. Hansu ate the ramen with incredible appetite. He said it was the best food in the world. Even the patriarch was interested in this dish. It's a pity he's incorporeal and can't taste the incredible flavor. After lunch, Hansu headed for that all-important test. He didn't know what to expect yet. The same girl comes out in front of him. She was covered in wounds and bleeding. Hansu was shocked. Kim's assistant followed the girl and asked if she was okay and how she was feeling. The assistant said she did great and asked her to go to the office and get her class document. And then Hansu thought that it looked like he was going to have a hard time there, and it was unclear what to expect. The appraiser greeted Hansu. He introduced him to the battle stimulation room. This system was created by the brilliant engineer and S-class hunter Anderson Walker. Combat stimulation gives the most realistic experience of fighting a monster, commented the evaluator. He also warned that damage taken during stimulation also has realistic consequences. The appraiser began the briefing and said that there were a total of 10 levels to complete. Hansu's class is A, so he starts at level 4. The battle stimulation has begun. Thanks to the system, Hansu finds himself in a very green area, but he can't yet assume the danger ahead. Whoever created this machine is clearly versed in the magic of the mystic dimensions, says Patriarch. What is mystical dimension magic? Hansu asked. It is used to deceive the enemy or to conceal something, the Patriarch replied. Suddenly, a monster attacks from the Patriarch's side. He had run out of strength last time, but this time he was sure to have a blast with these monsters. There were more and more monsters. They appeared as if out of nowhere from different directions. The situation was escalating. Then the Patriarch orders the use of the lazy donkey technique. Hansu, of course, did not immediately understand, but followed the teacher's order. It turned out that the monsters were not the most dangerous thing that awaited Hansu. A huge ogre, about 10 times bigger than him, appeared in front of him. The ogre swung its fists like sledgehammers and destroyed everything in its path. Then Hansu started yelling that it was too huge and asked his teacher what he should do. The Patriarch told him that now he had a great opportunity to realize what he was capable of. He would have to figure something out on his own. Hansu realizes that if he runs away, he won't be given a class. So he decides to perform a 1377 killing kick. Hansu was about to be happy that he succeeded, but the ogre instantly came to his senses. The ogre grabs the guy. Hansu realizes that if he loses consciousness, it's all over. He started calling for help from the teacher. The teacher didn't respond. Then Hyun mouthed to himself to calm his breathing and distribute his energy throughout his body. He began to feel the energy of the heavenly demon within himself. It was rapidly flowing through his veins. All that power surged out of Hyunsu's body. He was able to concentrate his energy and overpower the ogre. The notification sounded that the level had passed. Level 5 will be ready in a few minutes. The appraiser says he's never videoed anyone breaking through the physical suppression system. He's clearly strong. Suddenly, Class A Hunter Lee Na enters the appraiser's room. She says the guy has a lot of potential and there is still a lot to see. The appraiser is happy to see her arrive. She says that quickly word of talent reaches the association. The girl says she can't let such a rare A-class fighter be snatched from under their noses. The testing continued. This time, Hansu was in for an unbelievable cold snap. The Patriarch was surprised that this mage could also create the illusion of weather. He said that even among sorcerers with mystical dimension techniques, few are capable of such a thing. Suddenly, a girl runs towards Hansu and asks for help. Hansu asks her what's wrong. Suddenly, this cute and defenseless girl turns into a monster and clings to Hansu's throat. At this time, the girl from the association shares with the evaluator that the guy has a very rare talent, different from all the awakened ones she's seen. It turns out that in this level, Hansu has to fight vampires. He has a knack for techniques. Again, the announcement that the level is going to pass. The appraiser admires this guy. Level 6 is about to start, but before that, Hansu can rest for 30 minutes. Hansu isn't very happy with himself. He feels like he could have done better. But the evaluator assures him that he has nothing to worry about because he is the first A-class fighter to pass the 5th level. The appraiser asked Hansu to go to the office and get his papers. The guy thanks him and goes. However, a gorgeous girl appears on his way. Hansu fell into a stupor again and didn't know what to do. The girl introduced herself and said her name was Limi Na, and she was from the association. Hansu was still motionless. Barely. He extended his hand to her. And then the patriarch appeared. He told him that he was his student, and so the girls would be lining up to meet him. Limi Na held out a contract for Hansu to sign from the association. She said that any hunter would be attracted to such conditions like theirs. Hansu can't believe his eyes. He's finally going to be a real hunter. Limi Na goes on to clarify that this contract is customized for Hansu. The patriarch tells the guy that such a beautiful woman is offering to sign such an important document. Even in the patriarch's abode, you don't see such beauties. But then the patriarch tells him to think with his head and that Hansu deserves better. When he saw 10 years of service in the terms of the contract, he told her to immediately lower the term. Then Hansu told the girl that he would prefer a 5-year contract and increase the life risk allowance since he would have to raid S-class portals. Limi Na was shocked at such terms, but she knew that they shouldn't let him go because this was a rookie that the association really needed. A girl suddenly bursts into the room, kicking the door with her foot and yelling, "Gotcha!" She says that the association is at it again, and that they don't put hired hunters in anything, and they always write such Kabbalistic contracts. And then Hansu asked, "Red Lions?" "Exactly," replied the girl. She said her name is Ha Yurak, and she is from the Red Lions Guild. She is an S-class hunter. The patriarch couldn't contain his emotions and told Hansu that this girl was also one to look at. The girl squeezed Limi Nu on the sofa and told Hansu that the Red Lion Guild was offering him much more than an association. Limi now lost her temper. She claims it's the association's business. To which Ha Yurak replied that she is also registered with the association. The patriarch can't contain his admiration. He says that this girl is incredibly strong, and he hasn't met anyone like her in their world. Ha Yurak continues to press Hansu. She tells the guy that he will have more opportunities in the guild than in this corporation. This is because the corporation has a lot of expenses. Limi Na replies that this information is long outdated. And then Ha Yurak says that the Red Lion Guild got the same rights as the association and they are waiting for official confirmation. This information stunned everyone. Limi Na immediately set out to verify it for reality. Hansu can't believe that the Red Lion Guild is now as powerful as a government agency. Hansu has finally made up his mind and is ready to voice his verdict. He had to interrupt the arguments and the girls turned their attention to him. However, at this time, there was a real massacre going on in the mountains of Illich in one of the portals. One of the hunters realizes that they are in trouble. None of this was in the intel. It was said that they would have to walk on wet ground. But there is a deep sea. There are many times more monsters than expected, and they are much faster than the hunters. This is definitely not a Class B portal. The hunters are ambushed. If they don't do something, they'll be wiped out. They decide to call the squad leader for help. The petty officer orders a retreat. He says he will hold them off. All the hunters need to retreat to dry land. The hunters know that the petty officer has a unique superpower for emergencies. They are sure he will save everyone. The petty officer uses the shadow clone technique. It is one of the most difficult S-class techniques, lasting up to 10 minutes. Everything worked out. The hunters thank their petty officer because thanks to him they survived. The petty officer asked them for a beer on arrival for such a feat. The hunters waiting on land for their colleagues also admired the foreman and were shocked by his skills. "Everything is over. It is time to wrap up the operation," said the petty officer. Suddenly, a monster of enormous size burst out of the water and bit off half of the petty officer's body. Meanwhile, Hansu voiced his decision. He said that he would wait for other offers, in case there was a guild with more favorable conditions for him. He wouldn't be in a hurry for now. He said goodbye and left his number for both girls, telling them to call him in case of any problems. Ha Yurak is stunned by such insolence. Both the association and the Red Lions offer him a contract, and he just walks away. She doubts that the other guilds will even offer him a contract. With anger and rage, Ha Yurak literally burst into flames. Limi Na thought that she hadn't changed a bit, just as fiery. Meanwhile, Hansu had returned home, and he and the patriarch began their training. The patriarch informed him that he would now be learning the heavenly demon's superiority gate. The teacher explained that classes are earned for defeating a strong monster, or when you find a rare artifact. Hansu asked him, "Are there really any classes higher than the 5 classes everyone knows?" The patriarch proceeded to teach him. He explained to his student that stance and proper movement is the foundation of martial arts. He claims that only after learning the basics can Hansu begin to learn the techniques. The patriarch is sure that with the kind of skills Hansu has, he can learn everything from the first time. The teacher began to show the first set of 5 superiority gate movements. The movements are light and smooth. Hansu successfully mastered this complex. "So much for the appearance of the heavenly demon," said the patriarch. "The rest should be applied according to the situation." However, Hansu doesn't learn it all the first time. The patriarch tells him that there is still a lot of trial and error ahead. The teacher proceeds to demonstrate the second set of moves, the heavenly demon flight. The teacher says that once Hansu is able to master this complex, he will ride the air like a dragon and be behind the enemy in no time. "So much for the flight of a heavenly demon," says the patriarch. In his thoughts, Hansu realizes that this speed of flight doesn't even compare to when his teacher drags him through the air. The patriarch tells Hansu that if he internalizes the appearance of the heavenly demon and the flight of the heavenly demon, he will be able to learn the first 6 techniques of his cult, crushing blows from the heavens. The teacher tells Hansu not to get distracted or make faces because the third set of moves is even more difficult. The patriarch starts the third complex. The information doesn't digest at all in Hansu's head. The patriarch just disappears before his eyes. He can't see him at all. And then the teacher appears behind his student's back and says that this is the technique of the heavenly demon's soul exit. The patriarch immediately proceeds to the 4th complex, the heavenly demon soul vortex. This turns out to be the patriarch's favorite technique. With this technique, he can spin so fast that he creates an invisible vortex that consumes the opponent's soul. Hansu couldn't assimilate even 1% of what he saw. He doesn't understand how he can repeat it all. The patriarch repeats that if he internalizes the soul vortex and soul exit, the next 5 techniques of crushing blows from the heavens will be available to him. Hansu asked the teacher, "Are there 11 techniques in total?" The patriarch replied that there are 12, and for the 12th technique, the minimum requirement is to know the 5th complex gate superiority gate of a heavenly demon. Hansu realized that if he mastered even the 5th superiority gate complex completely, it would not guarantee that he could master the 12th technique. The patriarch proceeded to demonstrate the 5th complex. He stomped his foot in such a way that the whole world turned upside down and Hansu fell under the ground. "Exalt yourself so that all around you bow down," the patriarch pronounced. Hansu lay face down with no strength at all. Meanwhile, there is a meeting in the association about the massacre in the mountains of Illich. It is reported that only 4 B-class hunters and 5 supports survived. One of the counselors says that Petty Officer Daeho is dead. This is the association's 3rd raid into the portal of the mountains of Illich and again a defeat. One of those present turned to the head of the intelligence department and asked what they were even doing there if they couldn't properly categorize this portal. The negotiations turned into a real gossip, and the room was abuzz. They could not come to anything logical and common. Suddenly, Limina stood up from the table and said that they could all fight among themselves, but it would not solve the problem. So she proposes her own solution. At this time, Hansu wakes up in a cold sweat in his bed and doesn't realize how he got there. The patriarch yells at him that he's a disgrace because he fainted after failing to make it through practice. And then Hansu remembers that he also tried to learn the heavenly demon's superiority gate. And then something happened. The patriarch had explained to him that the superiority gate was a skill that allowed one to move through the air as if on the ground. If he showed everything in full strength, Hansu would die. Hansu's thoughts were that he would never want to go through such a thing again. Then the patriarch reminded him that he had already told Hansu that he wasn't ready yet. He advised his disciple to focus on increasing his energy potential. Hansu obediently agreed and went to rest and gain strength to continue his training. Meanwhile, at the association meeting, Limina is ready to propose a solution to the problem. She suggested that the association should consider cooperating with other associations. This suggestion caused a storm of negativity. Then Limina continued, and said that they needed to cooperate with the Red Lion Guild. Such a statement caused even more discontent from the surrounding people. The people present were saying that they had already given the right for the Red Lions to use the portals, and if this was Li Mi-na's only solution, then it was time for her to quit. A frustrated Li Mi-na sank into her thoughts. She realizes that for the association, the portals are already just an object of trade. The next day came, and Hansu's day started off great. His paycheck came in, and he can finally pay for his brother's hospitalization. When he paid the debt, there was practically nothing left in his account. That's when he thought he should have signed the contract. But Hansu's phone was flooded with offers of cooperation from other guilds besides the association and the Red Lions. Then Hansu got excited and suggested that the teacher go eat ramyun. The patriarch was actually happy about the idea even though he can't taste the food. But Hansu also tried to jab at the teacher's pain, saying he should definitely try it. Then the teacher got angry and swung to give him a slap. But the nimble Hansu dodged, saying he had learned something about the appearance of the heavenly demon. Happy Hansu went to the store to buy noodles. Then he meets his friend Yoon. He asked her how she was doing. The girl replied that she works part-time at the store on weekends to help her little siblings. This touched Hansu, and he went to the cash register, punched his own merchandise, and left the money on the counter. A girl came to the register and noticed that she had to give her change. She caught up with the guy, but he told her it was for her. The girl was hurt to the core. She couldn't contain her pleasant emotions. At this time, the patriarch sneaks up and asks the guy if he was planning to buy a girl's heart with money. Hansu then revealed that Yoon also lost her parents when the portals opened and now she's raising her brother and sister alone. The guy also shared that the girl, just like himself, sacrificed school to earn money for her family. But the patriarch slapped him on the back and told him that it was not proper for his student to sing dithyrambs to himself. Finally, they arrived home and Hansu began to savor the divine noodles. Is it really that good? The patriarch asked. The guy said that they make the best ramyun in the world and that everyone should try it. Then the patriarch couldn't stand it any longer and reached for his chopsticks. He couldn't stand to watch the boy enjoying the food. The patriarch managed to eat the noodles. Hansu couldn't believe his eyes. The teacher's emotion was incredible. He said that it was definitely one of the most delicious dishes in the universe. That means the patriarch can only eat from Hansu's hands. What a good student, the teacher said. And then the patriarch ordered Hansu to feed his teacher. The boy wasn't very happy. Now another inconvenience had been added. It was a beautiful sunny day in the city of Kangdong. People were going about their business. Here, for example, a girl is walking along, happy that she was able to buy lunch boxes for her children. But then the peace of the city was disturbed by monsters. They began to appear from under the ground along with jets of water. The city began to flood. The mermaids killed everything in their path. The people had nowhere to run. Among the monsters was a female, clearly their commander-in-chief. She shouted that this was now their land of plenty and they would drive out all who crowded it. She shouted that they would now be the rulers of this land. The monsters stopped at nothing. At this time, Hansu and his teacher continued their training in the black hole where the patriarch appeared from. The patriarch couldn't understand why this dimension was empty, since he always felt a surge of energy there, and why he was in a different time and dimension. Hansu tried the practice of energy circulation. After it, he feels rested and not so tense. His teacher explains to him that the circulation clears his streams of negative energy. Teasingly, Hansu said that after the circulation, he could avoid going to the doctors. The patriarch told him not to talk nonsense, but rather to take a stand and practice celestial demon apparition and celestial demon flight. Although Hansu's ability in the last training session wasn't great, but he had learned the techniques. Now he will try to reproduce what he memorized. Hansu is doing well. The patriarch didn't think he would do so well the first time. This guy is really gifted. At this time, the association is in complete chaos. The alarm sounds and the announcement of flooding in Kangdong. Urgent mobilization. Li Mi-na says that she was sure this would happen. She should have teamed up with the Red Lions. She immediately assumed that if it's in Kangdong, then the Daizek Guild is already there. The leader of the guild is the Panther Man Hyunwoo. Li Mi-na immediately ordered to send all the fighters she could to the center of events. She clearly realized that the Daizek Guild would not be able to cope without help. At this time, Hansu and Patriarch finished their training and returned home to gather their strength. And then the Patriarch politely addressed Hansu, The guy didn't even understand why he was so kind. And the patriarch said that after the training he wanted to eat something, and that he needed to make him some ramyun. He also asked him to turn on the magic lantern that the Wesenic says he wants to learn more about the world. Hansu turns on the TV, and the news says that there is flooding and chaos in Kongdong right now. The fish people have flooded the city and are killing people. Hansu immediately realizes that the monsters broke out of the portal of the mountains of Illich. That meant that the third raid had also been defeated. The patriarch asked the guy about the location of the Illich Mountains since they had been there recently. Hansu confirmed that they were there a couple days ago, and then Hansu is covered in cold sweat. He remembers that it's the neighborhood of that girl Yoon, who's taking care of her brother and sister on her own. The guy takes a bullet out of his house and runs to help. There are still chances to save his acquaintance and her family. He realizes it takes too long by car, but if he could run in a straight line, would be there in 20 minutes. But there are buildings in his way, and that's when Hansu makes the best decision of the day. He'll take advantage of the Sky Demon's flight. Hansu is practicing the incredible technique his teacher showed him. The patriarch watches from the sidelines and is pleased with his student's performance. Meanwhile, the Daizek Guild in Kongdong, led by the Panther Man, is on the defensive. The main hope is only in the commander-in-chief. He tells everyone not to panic and to fight with confidence. Even the local butcher Bambo has come to the rescue, fighting with incredible bravery on par with the hunters. Everything was going according to plan, until suddenly the butcher was attacked from behind by a mermaid. The butcher had no chance. A beautiful huntress came to the rescue. The butcher marveled at how nimble her boat was. The huntress advised him to buy one. The huntress decided to introduce herself and told the butcher that she was a chemist archer from Kongdong. The butcher was grateful for her help and gave her an encouraging gesture as a greeting. At that moment, a monster of incredible size bursts out of the ground. It grabs the butcher and bites off half of his body. All this happened before the archer's eyes, and with anger and hatred, she decides to avenge Bambo. She fires one arrow after another, but the beast doesn't feel her blows. The Panther Man notices this and immediately grabs the archer and tells her they have to get out. He doesn't want her to get eaten too. Then the female commander-in-chief of these monsters shows up. She says the hunters make good food. The more hunters that come here, the better, she says. They need more victims. The giant beast catches up with the Panther Man and the archer. A few seconds and they'll be gone. But suddenly, Hansu appears. He uses one of the most powerful heavenly demon techniques and heads straight for the beast. A huge flash of light appears above the heads of the Panther Man and the archer. They don't realize what's happening. The Panther asks the archer who it is, and how did he kill the monster with one blow? There's just no such thing. The archer assumes it's someone from the S-class. At this time, the patriarch prompts Hansu that the monster's life energy hasn't been extinguished yet. The monster makes a counterattack, but Hansu uses the heavenly demon apparition technique. After this technique, the guy's condition was not good. It was like his legs started to fall off. However, the monster is still alive. The patriarch shouts to the disciple that he is a moron and needs to evenly distribute energy to all the muscles of the body. Hansu heeded his teacher's advice and continued this difficult fight. The patriarch continued to watch from the sidelines. At this time, Limina is standing in traffic and nervous that she can't get to the center of events any faster. And then, on the dashboard of her car, a stream of the events in that very place comes on. The host of the stream asks the viewers who is the hunter fighting the giant. Everyone talks about an unknown hunter bravely fighting a giant monster. A hunter that no one knows about. Limina just can't believe her eyes. She recognized Hansu. She had no idea he was so strong. The girl makes a decision to get out of the car and head there faster on her own. The main thing for her was to make it in time. Hansu at this time is quite good at keeping the defense. He uses the heavenly demon flight technique, and he successfully manages to do so. In the moment, Hansu thought that if it was a test, there would be at least 1,300 units there. The patriarch tells him that snakes have the most vulnerable spot is the chin. We need to get close to it with a heavenly demon flight. But then this woman appears again. She turns to the snake and says that this man is dangerous and must be killed immediately. Hansu finally gets close to the snake's chin. He is fully prepared to deliver the decisive blow. The woman keeps yelling at the snake to absorb and take Hansu's power. The snake needs to grow. Hansu is stunned. He fails to land a blow to the serpent's chin. The serpent is thrown to the ground. The patriarch realizes that this sorceress is supporting the monsters with healing magic, and this is a different matter. He has never felt such a wild urge to intervene before. If he were material, he would have turned them all to dust. The only thing the patriarch can do now is to save his disciple. But it's not clear how. Suddenly, Hansu appears. She orders everyone to stand still and don't move. She turns to Hansu and asks if things are really that bad. The patriarch is overjoyed at the arrival of this maiden. She tells Hansu that he did well, defending the city bravely. But if he had known about the sorceress, he might have won. She also turns to the guy and says that she said all this as a future guild member. Now she takes matters into her own hands. The sorceress at this time says that the girl is very strong. She hasn't met such mortals in a long time. Hansu begins the battle with the serpent. She will definitely be able to defeat this vile monster. The patriarch takes Hansu away and says that running away is just a strategic retreat. Outside the store, the mermaids attack Yoon. She screams and begs for help. She's never been so scared. But suddenly an archer and a human panther appear. The archer deftly handles these mermaids with her arrows. They save the girl. The archer picked up Yoon to take her to a shelter, and the panther man went in search of other survivors. Finally, Hansu woke up. He is very weak, unable to feel a single piece of his body, and asks the teacher what happened to him. The patriarch explains to him that the serpent was controlled by a sorceress. If it wasn't for her, he would have won. Hansu is furious. He asks the teacher, did he really carry it away fleeing? The patriarch replies that he said it was a strategic retreat. Hansu is very angry and upset by the patriarch's action. However, the patriarch told Hansu that there was nothing to worry about anymore. He told him that that warrior girl had come to the rescue and is now bravely fighting the monster. After hearing this, Hansu's eyes glistened with rage as he shouted that this was his prey and he wouldn't let anyone take it. But the patriarch quickly grounded Hansu. He told him that with such an exhausted body, a battle was out of the question now. The patriarch also reminded the guy that he needed meditation and energy circulation right now. Hansu asked the teacher what kind of warrior came to help. The teacher answered him that it was the leader of the Red Lion Guild, Hansu. The patriarch is confident that this girl can definitely handle the sorceress and her snake toy. There's nothing to worry about, he said. But Hansu kept saying that this is his business. He's a chow and must see it through. His teacher reminded him that his body couldn't take it. So Hansu got to his feet and told the teacher that he had lost his parents to the monsters, that his brother was in the hospital, and that he wouldn't give up. Then the patriarch thought for a moment. He saw talent in the kid, but he didn't expect that he could have such a fighting spirit. Seeing the fire in Hansu's eyes, the patriarch said there was one way. Hansu wanted to find out what that way was quickly. The patriarch warned him that there were serious consequences to this method. He should think about it carefully and make the right decision. Meanwhile, Hansu continued her battle with the sorceress and the serpent, but she doesn't like fighting on the water. The patriarch started to perform the ritual. He told Hansu that this was his opportunity to get a taste of the power that would be waiting for him in the future. He also warned the guy that his time is limited, and he should not forget that he is immortal. Meanwhile, Hansu bravely held her defenses. She is going to roast that giant snake alive. Hansu is sickened by the patriarch's ways. It's like he's about to be torn apart from so much energy. The sorceress can't believe her eyes. She says she didn't expect to meet her equal. The overlord will be furious. She tried to take action against Hansu, but the huntress told her that such tricks would not work. And as soon as the sorceress came into the huntress' sight, she asked her if she had sensed that her worm was in danger and had gotten out. Hansu used one of her strongest techniques, and she managed to destroy the sorceress. The patriarch had finally finished his ritual. Hansu now had the temporary ability of the celestial demon body activated. After defeating the sorceress, the huntress asked the worm, what will it do now without its chiller? But the worm tried to get away from her. She tried to catch up with him, and realized why there was no point in buying expensive shoes. She had to take off her shoes and run barefoot. At one point, she had had enough of this snake. She ordered the immediate evacuation of all citizens around. A couple minutes later, a notification came from her colleagues that all the citizens around had been evacuated and the area had been cleared. Hansu then gathered herself into a lump and gathered all her power in her body. She kept repeating that she was one of the 9 S-class hunters on this planet. The huntress unclenched her body and erupted like an atomic bomb. She shouted to the serpent that she had blown up all the buildings around it, and it had nowhere else to run. Ha-Yurak was already close to her goal. She was sure that just a little more and the worm would be a corpse. However, on her way to her goal, Hansu stops her and tells her to wait. The huntress's eyes instantly filled with anger. At this time, Lee-Mi-Na runs through the city thinking that Hansu can't do it alone since he has no experience in combat at all. As she ran past a stall, she spotted some cast iron weights on sale and thought it was just what she needed for the fight. She quickly bought a few and hurriedly ran on, even forgetting to take the change. Lee-Mi-Na used her abilities to easily spin the kettlebells in a circle in the air like feathers. She then grabbed one of the weights and flew into the air with it at an incredibly high speed. At this point, Ha-Yurak doesn't understand what Hansu is missing here. She asks him why he came, and the guy replies that he's going to finish off the snake. But it doesn't work that way, the girl replies to him. She says that the worm actually pissed her off too. Ha-Yurak is very bright. She offered the guy the opportunity to destroy the snake for his promise to join the guild. The huntress noticed that Hansu was somehow very charged. She knows he's talented, but he looked like a taut string. And before she could blink her eyes, Hansu disappeared. The girl didn't even notice him moving from his seat. Hansu got as close to the snake as possible and began to apply crushing blows from the sky. Obviously, the serpent now had no chance in front of such incredible strength and power. The patriarch watched the battle. He marveled to what unimaginable heights he had managed to increase Hansu's stamina. But one thing was unclear to the teacher: how the disciple had managed to capture a part of the heavenly demon's muscle memory, which was passed down from generation to generation. Hansu began to apply the 3rd level of crushing blows from the heavens. He was filled with an enormous amount of energy, and then he made a strike that cut the monster's head in two. The energy in Hansu's body was unimaginable. The monster began to tear into pieces from different directions. Its body was in numerous wounds, from which blood was pouring out. Ha-Yurak didn't understand how such a thing was even possible. She had no idea that this guy's strength was so enormous. At this time, Lee-Mi-Na arrived on a gyre. Ha-Yurak was shocked by her appearance, but teased that she was late for something. Lee-Mi-Na's face was filled with emotion, and she asked the huntress, "Is it really Hansu?" At this time, Hansu's temporary ability awakening stopped. He didn't expect the effect to be so short. But then the unexpected happened. The guy started coughing up blood. His strength left him altogether, and he started flying down. Lee-Mi-Na and Ha-Yurak instantly rushed to his aid and flew down to keep him from crashing to death. The patriarch watched from the side and was surprised how his disciple managed to snag 2 of the best beauties. Meanwhile, the Yun girl was finally able to meet her brother and sister. Archer delivered the girl to her family and called the Panther to find out how things were going in the center of events. The Panther reported that their situation was improving little by little, and that the leader of the Red Lions had dealt with the sorceress. He also relayed to the girl that the serpent had been destroyed by that unknown hunter. The archer was not particularly happy about this news. The archer said goodbye to Yun and her family and headed towards the Panther. Yun was very grateful to the girl and wished her to take care of herself. The next day came, and Hansu woke up in the hospital. He didn't wake up completely on his own. The patriarch had already asked several times if he was going to get up. Hansu started asking his teacher what had happened to him. The patriarch told him that his poor memory was failing him all the time, but he still told him that he had lost consciousness after receiving a crushing blow from the sky. And then the patriarch became furious and started yelling at his disciple because he dared to use his heaven-shattering strikes. Hansu replied that he didn't remember anything. The argument was interrupted by a knock on the door. A female visitor had come to see Hansu. Of course, it was Lee-Mi-Na and Ha-Yurak. Meanwhile, the hunters are busy trying to capture and kill all of the remaining mermaids. A local media outlet interviews the leader of the 3 Unity Guild, Choi Hyun. The girl asks for comment on the situation. Choi Hyun says that they are doing a sweep of the city area, especially in the sewers and tunnels. The guild relays that the townspeople can rest easy. They will find and kill each of the fishermen. Hansu came to his senses and was surrounded by the girl's care. Ha-Yurak tried to feed him apples, and Lee-Mi-Na resented her because those apples were peeled by her. Hayurak called her petty. The rivalry between the girls reached a high level, but then Lee Min-na remembered that she had something to show Hansu. She took out a black mysterious box. The contents of this box were dazzlingly bright. It was very beautiful and mysterious. Hansu didn't immediately realize what it was and asked the girls. Hayurak replied that it was his highest reward for the battle. The patriarch couldn't believe his eyes. Elixir? He shrieked. It's the heart of a monster, Lee Min-na explained. The patriarch told the guy that he had never encountered an elixir of such incredible power before. Lee Min-na continued to tell him that monster hearts were a substance left behind after the death of a rather ancient monster. It contained great power. Hayurak advised the young man to eat the monster's heart. She assured that after doing so, his stats would increase significantly. Such a heart could give a grade 1 upgrade. She also added that this serpent was not that big, however. If it had such a heart, it was very ancient. The patriarch licked himself from such a prey. He knows that this elixir contains 500 years of chi energy charge. Hyun asked why they are giving him this incredible artifact. Hayurak advised to consider that they are just being kind. Lee Min-na told Hyun-soo that one must still know how to use the heart properly. She offered to tell him that when he checked out and came to their office. Hearing this, Hayurak asked why he would do that when he has her. After all, she is an S-class hunter after all, and she should know better. That's when a real argument started between the girls. Lee Min-na said that her method would give at least 25% power absorption. Hayurak promised 35%, and the teacher claimed that his method was unique and gave at least 70% force absorption. Class S doesn't give any knowledge about force absorption, shouted Lee Min-na. What can a girl who has never been one know anyway? Objected Hayurak. The patriarch liked watching such a show from the sidelines. He called it a tigress fight. He even asked Hyun-soo who he was going to marry. The guy, of course, didn't appreciate such humor. Evening came. The girls calmed down a bit and went to their corners. Lee Min-na decided to take a chance and talk to Hyun-soo, but the hottie decided to eavesdrop. Lee Min-na tells the guy that they made changes to the contract, and this is his chance. There may not be such an opportunity in the future, but her thoughts were insidious. She realized that Hyun-soo would have no problem rising to S grade, and she needs to recruit him sooner. Then the association situation will be saved. Hyun-soo scrutinized the document, but he still didn't make a final verdict. As Lee Min-na was leaving the room, Hayurak followed her towards Hyun-soo. She grabbed the guy's sore leg and asked him if he liked the association's proposal. The patriarch is sure that the two women would convince him to sign the contract too, even though he doesn't need to. Hayurak said she had no doubt that the association offered attractive terms. She went on to say that they must have offered immunity from criminal liability for killing people. Did she really guess? She asked Hyun-soo. Hyun-soo then asked the huntress how she knew about it, to which the girl replied that it was obvious. An awakened S-class doesn't need immunity, she said, and finished by saying that the power in their time is with those who have nuclear weapons or money. Power is the S-class hunters, the girl continued, and who will give them immunity of rights? It's ridiculous. The patriarch was in agreement with her. She assures Hyun-soo that the only thing he needs now, before he's grown to S-class, is patronage. The patronage of the Red Lion Guild, Hayurak, cried out the huntress. The choice was left to Hyun-soo alone. Hayurak finished and left the room, meeting Lee Min-na in the hallway and wishing her good luck. The girl was really pissed off by this. Lee Min-na walked in on Hyun-soo, and he said he was sorry, but she told him that it couldn't be helped. She wouldn't force it. The girl wished him a good recovery, but Hyun-soo interrupted her and asked if he could ask the association to help him. The next day came. Meanwhile, Yoon woke up her little brother and sister to wash up and have breakfast. The girl told her little ones that today was the day off, and it was time for her to leave for her part-time job. The children brushed their teeth in the bathroom and pondered why they couldn't sleep longer and then have breakfast. And they came to the conclusion that Philistines just don't survive in this world. At this time, the danger was right under their noses. In the bathtub, literally a few meters away from the kids, swam a mermaid. He had spotted his prey. Yoon was making breakfast and heard strange noises coming from the bathroom. She realized it was a monster. She needed to take action. The frightened little ones ran out of the bathroom. Following them was a huge mermaid who was ready to devour them. The monster grabbed the little girl with his huge hands. The little girl was scared and screamed for help. Yoon made an instant decision. She took a kitchen knife and pounced on the monster to protect her children. Brave Yun ran at the monster several times bigger than her with weapon in hand. There was only one goal in her mind. The girl stuck a knife into the mermaid's body, and blood spurted out. With that, she managed to divert the monster's attention. But still, the mermaid pushed her away, and Yun fell to the ground. She could no longer help her sister in any way. The mermaid switched his attention back to the little girl and decided to continue on without interference. But then Li Mina burst into the room. She came from nowhere and flew in on her kettlebell. She crashed right into the mermaid and dropped the girl. Now he realized that he was going to have to fight the huntress. With a wave of her hand, Li Mina raised all the stabbing and cutting objects in the house into the air and aimed them at the monster. The girl managed to defeat the mermaid. She wished him to go straight to hell to his relatives. Yun didn't know how to thank Li Mina, but she asked how she knew they needed help. She replied that Hansu had asked her to do it. At this time, the doctors at the hospital where Hansu is lying were curious about his well-being. Hansu told them that his body was still heavy, but that he was no longer in pain and had no sharp sensations. The doctor was amazed at his quick recovery, even though Hansu is a hunter. This is the first time he's seen such a speed of recovery. Hansu can finally be discharged. He headed to the cashier's office to pay the bills. But there he found out that the Red Lion Guild had already paid everything. This news stunned him. The boy decided to share the news with the patriarch. The teacher replied to him that Hyurak takes very good care of his people, but Hyunkuk couldn't help thinking that the girl had paid his bills and probably didn't have much money left. The guy decided to return the debt. He couldn't accept such a gesture from the girl. But as soon as he opened his phone, his mouth opened so wide. The patriarch thought he was jammed. So many zeros on his account Hansu had never seen before in his life. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had 600 million in his account. The patriarch asked him what he was so excited about in the first place. He explained that the initial payment was 600 million. The teacher began to say that his student had lost his mind with so much gold. Hansu replied that he just didn't know what it was like to be a beggar. Hansu asked how he could know that at all if he didn't get to see Ramyun in the store every day and not be able to afford it. And then the teacher grabs him by the scruff of the neck, applies the heavenly demon flight, and yells that they have a very urgent matter. The guy starts asking what the emergency is. It turned out that the teacher just really wanted a ramyun. Having done all their business, the teacher and student went to continue their studies. The teacher told them that absorbing the elixir would give them a 10% increase in chi energy, equal to 20 years. And he also said that if Hansu mastered his technique, the figure would rise to 70%, equal to 140 years. The patriarch asked the young man what he planned to do when he gained such power. After the teacher's words, Hansu began to recall the events that happened 2 years ago when the portals opened. He shared with the teacher that the portals took many lives and he, just like Yun, lost his parents. But now he knows that he is a hunter, and he will not allow any more humans to go through such grief. And then the patriarch shared a thought with the boy that maybe the monster invasion is the arrival of the great horde his ancestors told him about. Hansu asked, "What is this great horde?" And the patriarch asked if he remembered the techniques he had taught him. And then the patriarch told him that the heavenly demons passed down their divine skill from generation to generation. And this was started by the first celestial demon. He said it was all for the sake of one day fighting back the great hordes. But Hansu interrupted the teacher and said that the problem was that this prediction was not from his dimension. "It is," replied the patriarch, and said that's exactly the reason he wants to go home. At that time, Li Mina flew home to Hansu's house. She needed to report what happened at Yun's house, but the guy wasn't answering his phone. The patriarch made Hansu eat the monster's heart, but the guy didn't realize how he could swallow it. The patriarch reminded him that if he wasn't his teacher, the guy would eat that elixir piece by piece, and nothing would come out of it except what comes out in the toilet. Hansu finally made up his mind and took a bite of the elixir. Li Mina at this time decided to check if the front door was open. The door turned out to be unlocked and the girl entered. She couldn't reach anyone. And then the portal from which the patriarch had once appeared caught her eye. Hansu put the heart of a monster in his mouth, and the patriarch told him to listen to him. The teacher said that if he made a mistake, he would stay alive, but he wouldn't be able to stand on his feet again. The patriarch told him to start with the inner shell and to stop treating the elixir as food. It's necessary to tune into its energy. When Hansu embraces the heart with his inner gaze, it is necessary to slowly move it first to the dantian and then to the Welu point, the patriarch continued. Then the guy took his time, very slowly and concentrated, and moved the elixir to the Baihui point. Limi Na at this time looked at the black hole and couldn't understand how long it took to not clean the house to grow a mold that resembled a portal. The girl decided not to leave it just like that. Limi Na prepared water and cleaning agent to get rid of the black mold on the wall. But suddenly, a call came in on her phone. The girl was looking for the head manager of the branch. She said she was out of the office right now, but would come immediately. Limi Na thought that it was a pity that she couldn't clean up all this horror right now. She needed to go to the office immediately. The patriarch continued to prompt the guy that he now needed to move the elixir energy into the outer shell of his energy field. It occurred to the teacher that the heart energy of the slain serpent had strangely turned out to be fiery yang energy. He had not expected these portals, as they were called, to contain monsters of incredible power, but all the better for them. After all, Hansu would have to change his polarity to yang later anyway, so it was even better. The patriarch said that the heavenly demon martial art was the quintessence of yang energy. The degree of the elixir substance level had reached 32%. Hansu clearly followed all of his teacher's instructions. The patriarch had warned that once the elixir had completely dissolved into his aura, he needed to concentrate it back into his inner shell and not let it escape. It was much more complicated than Hansu had anticipated. The elixir was trying to leave his body, soul, and aura. The patriarch shouted at him to be patient, for the seed of the heavenly demon's power was sprouting within him. The degree of the elixir reached 60%. When the degree reached 70%, jets of blood poured out from every possible orifice of Hansu's body. The patriarch didn't interfere and only watched from the side. He knew that his disciple was now in a deep trance, but the patriarch was expecting 70%, but not 80%. He knew he had to continue while he could, but he didn't understand how this dimension gave such opportunities. The degree of the elixir reached 90%, but Hansu didn't stop. He wanted another 10%. Streams of blood flowed from his eyes, mouth, and nose. The patriarch was proud of his disciple. He said he would help him finish what he started. The teacher applied primordial qi. He wanted to help Hansu release his energy as much as possible. Hansu's body completely changed its original appearance. Finally, that flash exploded. The elixir gave off energy. Hansu completely absorbed the elixir. His body had reached the peak of yang energy. He became immune to the thermal effects. Now Hansu would be able to learn the techniques of any individual once a day. But after such an energy attack, he just collapsed without any strength at all. Meanwhile, one of the city's hospitals was in chaos. Some were being sent to the intensive care unit. Others needed to have their lungs pumped out immediately. Because of the sheer number of casualties, there were not enough beds. The hospital was filled to capacity, with doctors and nurses running from one to another. Limina arrived at the hospital. She had nowhere to even set foot. The injured were both on the floor and at the entrance of the facility. It was all because of the fish people. The girl found Yoon's room and went in to see how she was feeling and to give her some important information. Limina told her that her brother and sister were transferred due to lack of beds. They are now at Sasong Medical Center, but assured that they were fine. Yoon asked how her babies were feeling, but Limina shocked her with the news that they hadn't regained consciousness yet. The girl told Yoon not to worry because it's one of the symptoms after the fishmen attack. She's sure the doctors will do everything they can to help. Limina left the room and tried to call Hansu a few more times, but all attempts were in vain. But the girl was also gnawing at the thought of Yoon not being in a coma. How could this happen if she was the one who was hurt the most? She understood why Sister Yoon still hadn't woken up. After all, the girl had passed out from fear. But Brother Yoon hadn't been touched by the fish man. So why were they both in a coma right now? This is all very strange, thought Limina. Meanwhile, the Red Lion Guild had estimated the damage to the city at 1 billion won. HF Urak reported that there were 117 casualties, with more coming in every minute. Also, a man said that doctors have noticed an unexplained condition in those arriving after the mermaid's attack. People are falling into a coma. Ha Urak asked the reason for this condition, but was told that the doctors are still sorting it out. After hearing this, the girl decided to call Hansu, but he didn't pick up the phone. This angered her. He had just joined the guild and he didn't answer the leader's calls. Ha-Yurak's anger turned out to be no nonsense. It pissed her off that he didn't answer after she sent him a salary of 600 million won. At this time in one of the bars, Haxon the S-Class hunter and part-time guild leader of experienced Shadow Guild was having a conversation with Jill. Jill is also an S-Class hunter. He is the only one of the hunters who is not affiliated with any guild. Huxon asked Jill, did the Red Lion woman end up taking Hansu? He didn't understand how Ha-Yurak had managed to snag him. Huxon said he would have killed that rookie, but Jill told him to cut the crap and offered to live peacefully without war. This infuriated Huxon, and he said that he would rather kill Hansu than let the Red Lion Guild rise up. Hansu has the most beautiful dream. He is on the beach surrounded by beautiful women. Limina comes up to him in a swimsuit and asks him if he's tired. Then Ha-Yurak walks up to him in the same outfit, along with another hottie. She tells Hansu that she's had enough sleep, and it's time to go play beach volleyball. They start the game, and set a condition that whoever loses pays for lunch. And then comes the first serve from Ha-Yurak. Hansu doesn't have time to navigate, and catches the ball with his face. Limina was worried about him, and Ha-Yurak was yelling that he couldn't even hit a serve like that. Hansu justified that it was his first time playing volleyball. The ball rolled straight into the sea and Hansu had to swim after it. He didn't understand at all how the ball could get so far. As soon as he got to the ball and picked it up, a snake appeared in front of him. The snake attacked Hansu and demanded his elixir back. So there was also underwater lava under the water. The serpent managed to overpower Hansu. He fell down to the depths of the sea, right into the boiling lava. And then, in a cold sweat, Hansu jumped up and saw the teacher in front of him. The patriarch instantly demanded that he boil him some ramen. The teacher also told him that the big arrow on the plate had passed the number 12 5 times while he was sleeping. Hansu slept for 2.5 days. He immediately started calling the Red Lion Association and Guild. When he told Limina that he had eaten the elixir on his own, she said that he was crazy because he could die if he didn't follow the association's method. After that, Hansu also told Ha-Yurak about what happened. She thanked him for at least staying alive if he didn't want to follow her method. The guy was pleased that Ha-Yurak reacted much more calmly than he expected. During the call, he fed the teacher ramen. After that, the guy saw that his level had increased, and now once a day he could perform a technique he hadn't been taught. The patriarch replied that there was no such thing, and even if such a superpower existed, it didn't sound fair. The teacher wanted to give him an instructive flick, but he dodged it. Hansu said that his forehead is now a testing ground for flicks. Meanwhile, Yoon sobbed in the hospital that her brother and sister might never regain consciousness. She shared her grief with Hansu. The guy reassured the girl and said that they will definitely regain consciousness. It seemed to the girl that they even resembled him in some way. Then Hansu led Yoon to his brother Hyuntae's room. He shared his grief with her and told her that he was also in a coma. Hansu said that ever since they crashed the car, Hyuntae has never regained consciousness. The doctors can't answer why. Then the girl took Hyuntae's hand and introduced herself. She said that Hansu has done a lot for her. She continued that she doesn't know if he can hear her and relayed that Hansu is really looking forward to his return. She asked him to come back as soon as possible. The patriarch told Hansu that there was a very strange aura coming from his brother. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. He told him that there was a cursed seal on his brother's heart. This shocked Hansu, and he asked what to do about it. The patriarch replied that there was a way to bypass the seal, but it was a very questionable method. Meanwhile, an auction was going on at a museum in the city. There was a skeletal spear on display with an original price of 70 million won. An Aegis guild leader named Choi raised the price to 80 million won. He had set his eyes on this spear a long time ago. The spear was already almost in his pocket, but no sooner had the girl counted to 3 than Jin Shi outbid him. Choi got very angry and called Jin Shi a goat in his thoughts. There was no limit to his anger. A happy Jin Shi walked up to his car with his new purchase in his hands. He was enjoying this productive day. Suddenly, Choi came up to him and said that he was crazy to pay 200 million won for a thing that cost 70 million won. And then Jin Shi replied to him that he wouldn't spare 300 million for it. He also asked him to be honest. What did he lose at the auction? If Choi's heart sinks at the mere sight of the 200 million price, then he clearly doesn't belong there. Jin Shi continued and advised him to go home and eat ramen. Choi didn't tolerate such remarks and used one of his techniques. He prepared himself for battle. Jinshi was even happy about this. He said that it was an opportunity to try out his acquisition on someone who was a troublemaker. Choi laughed and said that he would see for himself that the weapon was only worth 70 million and no more. His opponent advised him not to try to seem cooler than he was, because he was already dead. A real massacre broke out, and Choi informed his new enemy that whether he knew it or not, no one had ever walked away alive having outbid him in an auction. At the Red Lion Guild, an angry Ha Yurak asked Choi if he was going to keep causing such trouble. She explained to him that she was inundated with complaints about him, but Choi replied that he couldn't help but get angry because that man had just come and taken an item from him at an auction. Ha Yurak ordered him to shut up immediately, and if he continued, she wouldn't crucify him. She warned him that if he made trouble again, she would tear him into small pieces and burn him. Ha Yurak chased him away and told him not to get in her face again today. But Choi wasn't able to just walk away. He asked when they were going to introduce him to that new hunter, to which Ha Yurak replied that it was none of his business. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Yoon was wondering from Hansu if he's now become that powerful hunter. Hansu replied to the girl that he didn't think becoming awakened had any fixed time frame. This was all very interesting to Yoon. She told him that it wouldn't be surprising if only someone high up helped him with it. Otherwise, it's unrealistic. Hansu only laughed it off. The guy suggested that Yoon go rest at home, and he would look after her babies and his brother. Hansu headed to his brother Hyuntae's room. He asked the patriarch again about the way to bypass the seal. The patriarch told him that the method was called chopping Heaven's tongue, but warned him that he couldn't use it now. Hansu asked what the reasons were, and the teacher told him that it was a secret technique that was a type of sorcery invented by one of the heavenly demons. He claimed that Hansu couldn't use it because he didn't have the body of a heavenly demon. But Hansu immediately interrupted him and said that he could use it because his level of listening to instructions had increased, and he could repeat one of his techniques once a day. After that, Hansu walked over to his brother who had been lying in a coma for a long time and stretched his hand in front of his body and began to apply the heavenly demon's chopping tongue technique. And it really started to work. The patriarch was surprised by this. He still didn't understand how this was possible and what kind of ability it was. Hansu tried his best. He could already feel his brother's heart beating at a new speed. But all of a sudden, everything suddenly stopped abruptly. Hansu asked his teacher why it didn't work. The patriarch replied that he just didn't have enough strength yet. He also added that he could feel the power of an incredibly powerful being here, and it would be difficult to deal with it. Meanwhile, Huxin and Jill continued to argue. Huxin was looking for strong hunters to destroy Hansu. Jill tried to dissuade him with all his might. At this time, someone knocked on their door and asked what was all the noise. It was Takashi, an S-class hunter and vice leader of the AES Guild. Over a few beers, they shared the situation with Takashi, and he replied that that was why he didn't work for Huxin. Jill asked Huxin what was up with that fragment this time, to which he replied that like last time, there was only a deserted wasteland. Gil suggested that he look for fragments in Korea, but Huxin replied that it was entrusted to the Red Lions. We would have to wait and see. And then Gil told him that the appearance of a new hunter, Hansu, might advance the search. Huxin agreed that there would probably be an expedition soon. Jill said that if the boss of heaven is the ancestor of the dragons, then the portals scattered around the world are fragments of heaven. Collecting all the fragments in a year was like a curse. It was about a prediction that said that if people didn't collect all the fragments in a year, this world would face calamities that even S-class hunters couldn't handle. Huxin said that they must find all the fragments in a year, whatever it takes. Jill supported him and said that more high-ranking hunters were needed. Meanwhile, Hansu was at the hospital in baby Yoon's room. The doctor told him that they did everything they could, but they never recovered. Hansu noticed that there were many patients like them in that room. They can't all come out of their comas. The patriarch said it's because of the cold energy in this room. All these people had meta-watermen. The teacher explained that creatures underwater originally carrying energy, and these watery bastards have a particularly strong energy. The patriarch continued that this is why those with high energy cannot accept it. When their energy and the water bastards' energy collide, it combines and becomes cold energy. Then Hansu asked his teacher if there might be some way to cure this hibernation. But he didn't have to wait for the teacher's answer either. He realized that if he used the yang energy to remove the yin energy, everyone would wake up. So Hansu went to the sleeping kids and started using yang energy. It was like he was clawing the black energy out of them. The patriarch ordered him to burn the yin energy, but Hansu thought if he absorbed that energy. But the teacher started yelling that his body is at extreme yang. Doesn't he know what will happen to him if he absorbs that energy? Hansu disobeyed the teacher and started absorbing the yin energy. The patriarch called him a brat. How dare he even dare to disobey? Meanwhile, Hansu managed to absorb the power of yin. His body transitioned from extreme yang to a harmonious balance of yin and yang. The patriarch couldn't believe if he had managed to reach the peak of the 3 flowers blooming. This is impossible, he thought. Even though it was only for a moment, the teacher was certain that he had seen Hansu reach the stage of peak blooming of the 3 flowers in a trance. When Hansu came to his senses, he asked the patriarch what a body with yin and yang harmony meant. The master explained that a body with harmony of yin and yang, surpassing both the body of extreme yin and extreme yang. Hansu then went over to help everyone in the ward. The doctors were shocked. Hansu also helped baby Yoon. They finally came to their senses. Yoon burst into tears of happiness. Meanwhile, Lee Mina was telling her subordinate to increase the number of hospital beds. The number of comatose patients was growing so fast that there were no hospital beds left at all. And then the girl received a call. She was told that Hansu began to bring people out of coma. He helped more than half of the patients. People were thanking Hansu, saying that God had sent him to them. Hansu went to every room in the hospital. The patients and their relatives said what an amazing hunter Hansu was, that he had this ability. Many people wanted to take pictures with him. The patriarch was proud of his disciple. He told the boy that as a heavenly demon, he should get used to being treated like this. Hansu received a call from the head of his guild. He said he was in the hospital right now, but Ha-Yurak replied that she was already aware of it. She said that the association sent them a request for help in the hospitals, and they also sent a check with the payment for that. And also the head said that Hansu can take the whole amount for himself. But the guy wondered how so. After all, he's just a guild member. Ha-Yurak explained that if he does something of his own free will, and it has nothing to do with the guild, then the payment is all his. Hansu promised to stop by the association once he was done. Ha-Yurak praised the guy, saying that the association will now be under their authority. She said he could take it as a compliment from the guild head. Night fell, at which time Haxin gets a call. He is informed that they found out where Hansu lives. Huxin orders the address to be sent to him immediately. Jill was sound asleep at this time and was unaware of what was happening. Huxin left the lodge and used his ability to get to Hansu's house as soon as possible. Morning came, and it started at Hansu's place with the patriarch demanding ramyun again. It pissed him off how the teacher didn't get sick of eating it. Suddenly, Hansu gets a call from the head of the guild. The guy answered and asked why he was getting a call at this hour. The head asked him where he is right now. The guy replied that he's at home going to make ramyun. A shout came from the receiver. Get out of there immediately. Ha-Yurak started yelling that something very strong was approaching his house right now. The guy instantly ran outside to survey the area and be ready for anything. He landed right outside Hansu's house and said that it was time for the rookie hunter to die. He aimed an incredibly powerful technique at Hansu. An arrow of tremendous energy and killing power flew in his direction. At this time, the intelligence in the association said that, as expected, an unidentified living organism was currently in the vicinity of Hansu's house. Lee Mina and Ha-Yurak get on the phone. Lee Mina said that supersonic speed, even among S-class hunters, is very rare. Ha-Yurak agreed with her and said she thinks it's Huxin because that bastard hates her to the core. Ha-Yurak thanked Lee Mina for the information and said that she was the only one who could stop Huxin. Lee Mina immediately got ready to head over there as well. But the CEO of the association entered the room and told her not to go there. He said that from the looks of it, there would be a battle of S-class hunters, and it was pointless for her to go there. The CEO said that the association still wouldn't stay away. They had already asked the Azure Dragon Squad to start preparing to use the Mirror World item. The Azure Dragon Squad was heading to the center of events. The squad was made up of a bee, an ant, a cheetah, and the commander-in-chief. The commander-in-chief warned the guys that this was S-rank, and it was a completely different level unlike before. He contacted Falcon and asked him if the item mirrored the world. Falcon confirmed and said that he was on his way out. He spread his wings, taking on the appearance of a bird, and went to Hansu's house as well. Meanwhile, Hansu was holding a defense against Haxan. Haxan had no idea that he had reached the harmony of yin and yang. He realized that Hansu had reached the realm of evolution. The patriarch looked at his disciple and realized that the power he felt from Hansu was much stronger than what he felt from Ha-Yurak. The teacher realized that Hansu had reached the realm of the highest peak where the patriarch came from. Hansu asked Haxan why he came out of nowhere, and then Hansu heard some unintelligible sound, as if there was a crash somewhere nearby. He asked everyone to leave immediately. The patriarch told him to focus immediately because he had a battle to fight. This wasn't the time to sputter around what was going on. Haxan was much stronger than all of Hansu's previous enemies. The patriarch could sense that as well. Hansu was surprised at how many abilities Haxan had. His body is covered in metal and he shoots energy bullets. Haxan uses a supersonic strike of 3 swings. His main objective was to destroy Hansu at all costs. Hansu felt defeated. His body was thrown back and he couldn't move. The guy couldn't feel his right arm. He never thought he would end up like this after receiving his internal energy. Haxan didn't stop. He approached Hansu to apply a supersonic strike of 5 swings. The patriarch reminded his disciple that was it really for nothing that he was learning how to move the heavenly demon. Hansu's listening for instructions activated. Hansu finally came to his senses and began to apply the second technique's celestial demon movement and then the celestial demon flight. Ha-Yurak meanwhile flew to the center of events as fast as she could. She hoped they hadn't collided yet. She wondered how long Hansu would last against Haxan if they did collide. Ha-Yurak guessed that Hansu would last about 10 or 20 seconds, but most likely it would be over in an instant. So she decided that she needed to hurry. Meanwhile, was holding on just fine. Haxan even thought it was strange, since he thought he would end it in just one blow. The patriarch, watching from the side, concluded that even though his disciple's comprehension level wasn't that high, he was able to attack Haxan right away. He considered him strong and was proud of him, but also, the patriarch realized that if Hansu couldn't overcome such a test, then he most likely wouldn't be able to grow as a heavenly demon. Haxan prepared to deliver the decisive blow, and even told Hansu that he admired how long he had lasted. But suddenly Hansu opened his eyes and told Haxan not to talk so much. He gathered energy into a ball and applied a seed strike. Hansu pierced Haxan with the strike, and he flew backwards. Haxan didn't think his punch would be that strong. Haxan looked at his arm and realized that Hansu had destroyed his reinforcement. This is impossible, he thought. This angered Haxan greatly, and he applied a silver pulse. The patriarch was surprised that his recovery was at the level of demonic monsters. The patriarch told Hansu not to give him a break and to use the wood strike to destroy his insides. Hansu started to use the Deva strike and said that he would slowly destroy every transmutation of Haxan. And then Hansu saw water in front of him. He thought that Haxan was vaporized by the wood strike. But the patriarch said he could still feel his energy. He was alive. The patriarch said that Haxan was now right below him, ready to deliver a powerful blow. Haxan suddenly jumped out, grabbed Hansu by the hair, and promised to kill him painlessly. However, Hansu replied that he couldn't do that to him. So he used his well-practiced leaf-punching technique. Haxan was seriously injured. He couldn't believe his eyes that this brat had managed to injure him. Hansu noticed that he was recovering again. He thought that he should have destroyed him immediately with a series of attacks, but he realized that it was too dangerous with so many people around. And he realized that today was a day off, and he had to get to the school. It was obviously empty. Hansu assumed that since the school was on high ground, he should be able to minimize the damage as much as possible. Haxan realized that he had a serious wound, and even using the silver pulse wouldn't fully recover it. Hansu had already climbed to the top floor and was glad that fortunately there was no one there. So this was his opportunity. Suddenly, Haxan flew up and taunted that Hansu was desperately trying to protect others. He applied a punch and Hansu flew off. Haxan told him that someone like him fights even in residential areas. And the guy replied that they have no right to be hunters then. Haxan was already starting to think that killing Hansu was pathetic. And who would have thought this guy would last this long? While Hansu lay powerless from Haxan's blow, Haxan was already preparing a powerful killing blow for him and said to blame it all on his boss, the guild leader. And then there was a huge explosion. After such an explosion, it was simply unrealistic to survive. Huxin used his most powerful technique. Through the ash and smoke, Huxin could be seen floating in the air above the school. He said that this country sucked at skill evaluation. This guy should have been given an A rank, but not an S rank. And then behind his back, Hansu asked if he should go back then. This guy surprised Huxin again. Huxin told him that he would burn him until he turned to ashes. But then he realized that his bullet energy had suddenly disappeared. This had never happened before. He knew that his body could still function normally anyway. Huxin shouted that this was the end, and they both pushed their most powerful forces. Only one should survive. Hansu applied the heaven-destroying demonic fists of the second technique, and at the same time, the seed strike. 5 days ago, Hansu was practicing and learning new techniques with his teacher. The patriarch told him that he needed to listen while he circulated his energy. His teacher told him that he has both the heavenly demon seed and also an incredible internal imugi energy, but he can't use them properly. Hansu realized that this was true. He had gained more internal energy, but he didn't feel that he had become stronger except for high-level recovery. The patriarch advised him to think of it as a deep well. He said that a strong one would be able to fetch water 100 times, and the weak probably won't even be able to do it 10 times, he continued. The water in the well would not run out. That's when Hansu realized that he had to become stronger. The training that would help Hansu become stronger and allow him to utilize his inner energy was real battles. The patriarch claimed that defeating a strong opponent is better than any training and many times more effective. And so during the battle with Huxin, Hansu realized that here he was, his first strong opponent right in front of him. But even after 2 seed strikes from Hansu, Huxin could still stand on his feet. The guy was already starting to think he was a monster. Hansu knew that on the other hand, his whole body felt like it was on fire from this attack. Huxin told him that who would have thought he could hit him so hard. No wonder the Red Lion wants to take him to his place, Huxin thought. Huxin prepared for the attack and said that although he was called an astral mage, he was ready for close combat as well. He threw a 5-swing strike at Hansu. The guy was defeated again and flew backwards. Huxin shouted to Hansu that he had nowhere to run, and he would take his head as a talisman. The patriarch was watching, and he yelled at Hansu that he was a brat, and he needed to get a grip or his head would fall off soon. The patriarch told him to use the soul of a heavenly demon. Hansu's listening to the instructions activated. Hansu's comprehension level of the heavenly demon soul increased to 65%. His teacher was telling him that he should definitely succeed. Even though during his training, Hansu kept telling his teacher that the heavenly demon soul was too heavy. The teacher told him then that it might be difficult to understand, but he needed to think with his head. The patriarch had explained to him during his training that one must initially take one step back and let one's mind go past that point. During the massacre with Huxin, Hansu was able to use the heavenly demon soul technique. He approached Hansu at an incredible speed. Huxin realized that he couldn't stop it anymore. Hansu threw several punches and Huxin fell down. Hansu fully used all his strength to scoop the water out of the well. Out of helplessness, he too fell to the ground. Hansu thought that this was finally over. But then Huxin shows up and attacks the guy. He says it's his turn now. Many centuries ago, there was a battle between a heavenly demon and a magic monster. The sky demon's job was to destroy the creature no matter what it cost him. The monster said that the celestial demon had exceeded his expectations. After all, he was the only one left. But the creature knew that the celestial demon had used up most of its strength and would definitely not be able to defeat it anymore. The celestial demon swore by the honor of his fallen brothers that he would tear the monster's skin, dry it, and eat it to appease their souls. The creature said it would give him a chance to be his right hand, so they could conquer the world together. The celestial demon told him to shut up, but the monster said that because he had already definitely used all of his internal energy. However, the celestial replied to him that this was a martial art that celestial demons could use without internal energy. It could borrow strength from nature. And then the celestial demon uses the practice of the celestial spiritual body, and he manages to overpower the creature. A bunch of people gathered around the school where the battle between Hansu and Huxin was currently taking place. No one understood what was going on there. The Azure Dragon squad had already arrived at the location as well. The commander-in-chief told them to proceed with utmost caution. He was shocked that an entire zone had already been destroyed, and it all happened in just 20 minutes. The squad knew that Huxin was hunting Hansu, and they assumed that the guy was probably already dead. While inspecting the area, the commander-in-chief notices that the battle between the two is still going on and Hansu is still alive. The battle has been going on for quite some time now. Hansu asked Haxin why he even came out of nowhere and attacked him. Haxin replied that he understood what he was talking about. The commander-in-chief at this time reported that Hansu was alive, and there was now a melee between them. Suddenly, Huxin's energy beam recovered. He was now renewed, ready to finish the job he started. The patriarch realized that his disciple needed help immediately. He grabbed Hansu and pushed him away from his opponent's strike. The squad didn't understand how they were supposed to stop these monsters, for there was complete madness going on. Huxin noticed that Hansu felt as if someone had pushed him away, but he knew that he would only have enough for one more attack at most anyway. Suddenly, an association ship flew up to Hansu. Limina was telling him to try his best to get up. The patriarch at this time was shouting at him to get up immediately, and that although he was his disciple, he couldn't continue to help him. Limina gave orders to the squad that they were obligated to intervene before Hansu died. The commander-in-chief hears the order to engage, but now that he sees these hunters in action, he can't bring himself to budge. And then he notices that Hansu has risen. It seemed like some kind of miracle or just plain luck to everyone. Meanwhile, the patriarch thought that even though it's not nice to interfere in someone else's fight, he should help Hansu escape. But Hansu didn't give up, even though the patriarch told him that there was nothing he could do. Hansu remembered the skill that he gained from leveling up. He can repeat one of the patriarch's skills once a day. Huxin asked Hansu what he was muttering to himself. The guy replied that he remembered a martial art that he could use without internal energy. Hansu had applied the heavenly spiritual body practice. The patriarch was shocked since he had never taught it to him. Haxin and Hansu directed their energies at each other. But then they were interrupted by an object of the mirror world, which began to absorb their energies. But not even a minute later, the object turned into shards. Huxin said that the association's shenanigans were hopeless. Suddenly, Huxin and Hansu were distracted by the appearance of Ha Yurak. She arrived to help Hansu. She told the guy that he was just an amazing person for holding out against Huxin for so long. Ha Yurak ordered the Azure Dragon squad to stand behind her. She'll take care of everything herself now. Haxin said that she was just a dumbass for deciding to tackle him alone. But suddenly, a portal appeared behind Ha Yurak's back, from which Jill and his ally emerged. A week ago, in the Gate Committee, the experts had summoned the S-Class hunters to announce their decision. It was said that the guilds that had S-rank hunters in each country would be in charge of the paradise. And if the gate appeared in countries without S-rank hunters, they would have to choose a guild to go there according to the situation. Huxin said that if they were just telling their decision, why did they have to call them in the first place? Angry, he asked how this could even happen if humanity's survival depended solely on how strong they were. He asserted that he and the Guild ES would act as they saw fit, and for everyone to get it in their heads. Ha Yurak couldn't stand it and told Huxin that they needed to work together to at least have a chance of surviving this disaster, and asked that they not go against the tide. Huxin summarized that if he could stop it, then humanity would live, otherwise it would die. That's all. The city was in chaos. People had learned that a gate had opened and thought that monsters were about to come out of there. The squad reported to the association that the 4 S-rank hunters had gathered in one place, and if they started fighting now, there would most likely be a disaster. Ha Yurak along with Hansu were going to hold the defense against Haxin and his allies, Gil and Takashi. But then the unexpected happened. Takashi stepped forward and apologized to Ha Yurak for his chapter because he had been foolish again. Hansu remembered that he saw Takashi in the magazine before. He is ranked 8th among the Hunter S-class of the whole world. Jill at this time told Huxin to see what he had done and what he was even doing in a foreign country. Jill asked him to stop provoking people because they shouldn't be fighting against each other. And then Hansu realized who he was fighting with. He remembered that he had read about Haxin in a magazine too, because he is an S-ranked hunter ranked 2nd in the world. Huxin has never appeared in the newspapers or on TV, so no one knows what he looks like. All they know is that he is very tough. Takashi told Ha Yurak that the ES Guild promises to apologize nationally and make amends. Ha Yurak accepted the apology, But Hansu shouted with anger in his eyes that he couldn't forgive such a thing. Hansu started to say that he was attacked for unknown reasons and destroyed the school he went to. But then Jill came up to him and introduced himself. He said he was very happy to meet him. Hansu was surprised that Jill spoke Korean. Jill explained that he could match brainwave lengths to speak different languages. He calmed Hansu down and said that they weren't here to fight. He and Takashi were here to pick up Huxon. Takashi also approached Hansu and apologized, promising to make up for everything. However, Hansu replied that after all this mess, apologizing and compensating can't solve anything anymore. He said that he needed to follow through with the bastard and asked everyone to get out of the way. But then Ha-Yurak intervened. She told Hansu that Takashi is the vice leader of the ES Guild and can be trusted. She said that there were no casualties, and that was the end of it. Takashi at this time was explaining to Huxon that the whole thing was an overt act of invasion. And even if an army is sent there, there's nothing they can do or say against them. Takashi took him aside and told him it was time to go home. But Huxon didn't just leave. He turned to Hansu in farewell, called him baby, and offered to finish next time, advising him to get stronger for now. Huxon finally flew away. Takashi exhaled a sigh of relief and said that they had averted another crisis. Jill and Takashi went home as well, telling Hansu goodbye that they hope they can get along with him in the future. Everyone dispersed and Ha-Yurak also exhaled. She only hoped Hansu wouldn't die, but who would have thought that he would fight Haxon as an equal? Then Hansu, accompanied by the guild head, headed to the hospital. The doctor examined the boy and said that his wounds were healing faster than expected and it would be over by tomorrow. Ha-Yurak turned to Hansu and said that he seems to have gotten stronger after eating the heart of the snake. Hansu finally took the subway home. The patriarch asked him why he was using the subway when he could use the sky demon flight. The guy replied that he was just really tired. While Hansu was on the subway, he thought that it was too dangerous to fight around ordinary people because people had almost gotten hurt today. He was worried that everyone was worried about the devastation. But as soon as he approached his neighborhood, he saw a completely intact school. Suddenly, Limina appeared and said she was worried about him. The guy didn't expect to see her there. The girl explained to him that the association had a team in charge of restoration and she was here with them to restore the neighborhood. Hansu was overwhelmed with emotion, overjoyed. He hugged the girl and started thanking her. He said he was really worried about the neighborhood as he drove home. Suddenly, people started looking out of the windows and thanking Hansu for saving them. The guy was very embarrassed. Meanwhile, in one of the castles, a man was smoking a pipe and said that the king wasn't happy that the Watergate plan had gone awry because of the misjudgment of the monsters. One of his subordinates asked him not to worry because a fragment from the West Sea of Korea would be enough to destroy them. Also, the man asked about the parallel plan. The girl replied that it was 72% complete, but if need be, he could personally step in and finish everything. Meanwhile, local news said that it was revealed that S-rank hunter Haxon was behind the destruction of Duven High School. It was also said that Haxon had illegally entered the country and tried to attack Hunter Hansu, destroying the school in the process. And it was also said that as a result of this, the E.S Guild released an official apology and mentioned that they would try to make up for everything as soon as possible. An unknown guy was watching the news. He was very happy about such events and couldn't contain his emotions. How cool Hansu is. Survived even after the White Wolf attack, he said. The guy speculated if Hansu would survive if he broke his neck. Meanwhile, Hansu was doing his morning routine in the bathroom, and the patriarch was rushing him because he wished for Ramyun. Hansu came out of the bathroom and the patriarch immediately became furious. How dare he walk around naked in front of him? Hansu laughed and said they were both men. Hansu told the teacher that there would be an expedition tomorrow, and he had prepared something special for them. The patriarch replied that he hoped it was 2 packs of ramen, but Hyosu said that today they would be eating spicy pork and rice. The boy assured the teacher that it was no worse than ramen. Hansu let the teacher taste the dish, but the patriarch immediately looked at the guy with an embittered look. The teacher started yelling that he was a bastard, and how dare he feed him one ramyun when there was such deliciousness. Finally, Hansu goes on his first official expedition. He never thought he would become a red lion hunter. Suddenly, someone turned to Hansu. Hansu turned around and almost fainted. He saw Hunter's son in front of him. Hansu happily said hello and told him that he was his longtime fan. The hunter replied that he was a little embarrassed. Sun suggested that they try their best together in the upcoming expedition, since this is Hansu's first expedition after all. The boy happily agreed. The patriarch asked the student who it is that he almost bowed at his feet and did not faint. Then the boy told the teacher that the hunter's son cannot be broken. He saved a huge number of lives. They call him the steel god of death. And then Hansu notices another marvelous hunter, June. The guy came up to say hello, and June happily reciprocated. The patriarch asks about this hunter as well. The guy told him that he was Hunter June, and even though he looks skinny, he has monster strength and people love him. And the patriarch immediately gave him a slap on the wrist. He asked why Hansu would lower his head so low in front of them like he was their servant. The guy replied that he was just a fan. The teacher then told him that he was the successor of a heavenly demon and he shouldn't bow his head to anyone. The patriarch continued that anyone could stand in front of him, but he was the successor who would lead the divine heavenly demon cult. After the patriarch's moralizing, Hansu went to Ha Yurak's office. She said that she needed to ask him something. Seeing Ha Yurak, the guy was surprised to see such a fancy outfit for the expedition. The head looked amazing. Ha Yurak decided not to linger and asked a direct question. She asked Hansu if he was going to continue working with her. The guy didn't understand what she meant, so the head explained to him that he survived the battle against Haxan. She said that even though the evaluation showed him to be an A-class hunter, which he may have been originally, but now Hansu is clearly an S-rank hunter. Hansu's eyes blurred from what he heard. He didn't expect to be evaluated to such a high level. Ha Yurak said that she had promised to help him until he became an S-rank, but that was no longer necessary now, and the agreement was null and void. The girl interrogated what Hansu was going to do, and if he was going to move forward with her. And then Hansu answered her that of course he was going to stay with her and continue the common cause. In his defense, Hansu said that he hadn't done anything for the guild yet, and especially he had gotten a lot for his contract. After that, Ha Yurak thanked the guy and offered to try his best on the expedition. After all, it was his first one. The head told him that if he went down to the basement, he would find his outfit with his name on it, and he should change into it. The formation siren sounded and all the hunters lined up in rows. Then Ha Yurak came out. She addressed her soldiers. She said that it was time to get the fragment of heaven. Ha Yurak told them that they would need high-level items as well as healing potions. She continued to encourage her soldiers. Ha Yurak demanded bravery from them to protect their comrades and civilians. The patriarch couldn't contain his emotions and said that although he had always thought Ha Yurak was an impressive woman, she had shown herself to be a heroine today. The head ordered each of them to look at the comrade next to them and be sure they would protect each other. Go after the fragment, the brave and courageous Ha Yurak shouted to her fighters. At this time, the man who had previously plotted to destroy the expeditionary force and the Red Lion Guild brought new news. The girl informed him that the Red Lion expeditionary force had just arrived at the Western Sea. The man asked what was their military strength. The girl told him that in addition to the S ranks, there were 30 A ranks. The darker man told her not to let her guard down for a second. He claimed that on that day the Red Lion would end and Korea would also disappear from the face of the earth. Meanwhile, the Red Lion troop was already sailing through the sea. Hansu shared with Sun that he was a little worried because it was his first time in paradise. Then Sun told him that in a two-part expedition, the first one had failed. Everyone except the S-rank died. He went on to say that although the second part was successful, more than 20 people died and most of the squad was wounded. Sun concluded that people go to paradise and die after they find out what it is. That's why it's called paradise. Sun warned Hansu that just coming face to face with one of the shards of paradise would make him shake with fear. The patriarch shared with his disciple that death awaited them at that gate. Hansu realized that if even the teacher was talking about such a thing, then it was definitely incomparable to a normal gate. Ha Yurak energized her entire army and gave her words of advice. She told them that the key to saving humanity lay in this gate. All the soldiers rushed across the portal and finally saw this place with my own eyes. The patriarch said it was too vast to be an illusion. Then the guy asked him to explain what an illusion was, and the patriarch told him that when he was young, he almost died because of the price he had to pay for the illusion. This illusion is known as the Heavenly Guardian, a mystical dimension technique. The teacher continued. The patriarch told Hansu that if he was right after all, They just needed to find the thing that would unlock and destroy the illusion. Hansu didn't see anyone from his squad, and he tried to contact the head, but no one responded. But the patriarch claimed that they were not alone out there. Meanwhile, the hunter from the squad also tried to contact the others, but no one was around. And then he notices a diamond on the ground that looks to be at least 500 carats. The guy thought he was lucky and decided to pick it up. Suddenly, a huge, toothy monster burst out of the ground. The diamond turned out to be a trivial bait. The guy had to fight with the monster. No matter how many techniques and methods he used, the monster was getting bigger and bigger every time. Death was already meeting him with outstretched arms. But suddenly, someone came to the rescue and used an incredibly strong technique. Hansu came to the rescue. He used a seed strike against the monster and held the defense decently. Meanwhile, Hayurak was flying over the sea. She never thought that they would be scattered all over the place once they went in. The head assumed that there was another gate inside the gate. All she could see in front of her was a vast sea. Hayurak couldn't just fly over the water anymore. She made the decision that she needed to see if there was anything under the water. But no matter how many times she tried to dive under the water, some force kept her from penetrating. Meanwhile, the hunters had to fight a huge number of monsters. There were already a large number of injured and killed. June shouted for no one to surrender, because once they surrendered, all their comrades would die. Hunter June didn't lose his optimism and shouted to Hunter Sun that they would never give up, because they were counting on a hefty bonus upon arrival. The monsters attacked from all sides. They were of different kinds and builds, flying, underwater, and terrestrial. But the hunters fought bravely, because they came there, not to die, but to save mankind. And there's the man and the girl. They're watching what's going on. The man says he's kind of bored. The man asked what the name of the guy who killed the Imugi and survived the battle with Haxan was. The girl replied that it was Hyunsu. The man said that he didn't think Hyunsu could defeat the Wizard King alone, because he picked him one of the strongest. Hyunsu defeated the monster, and it was time to meet the one he saved. Aegis Guild head Jay introduces himself to the guy. Jay is the guy who was plotting to rip Hyunsu's head off. One Hyunsu didn't like him anyway because he talked a lot. Even the patriarch couldn't stand his chatter, so he even asked his disciple to hit him once to shut him up. Jay said that he admired Hyunsu and was a fan of his. He watched all the videos and live feeds of the events. However, Jay noticed that during the whole time they were talking to Hyunsu, he looked up at the sky a few times. Jay remembered that Hyunsu's unique ability was listening to instructions, but he didn't realize what kind of instructions he was listening to. He then scrolled Hyunsu's fighting style in his head and assumed that it felt like some sort of unrealistic martial art. The patriarch at this time told Hyunsu that Jay continued to watch him and advised his student to be careful because those eyes were showing hostility towards him. And Jay still couldn't calm down. He kept assuming that Hyunsu was listening to instructions about martial arts, most likely from someone like a ghost. Hyunsu asked Jay why he was looking at him like that, but they were interrupted as they reached another gate. At that time, an association ship sailed towards the gate. Lee Mi-na informed her men that at this moment, Red Lion and Aegis Guild had entered the gate. She said that they would only enter if the Red Lion and the Guild were defeated. Intelligence reported that Anderson's intensity was now 24. Lee Mi-na hoped that Hyunsu would be okay. Hyunsu and Jay stood in front of the gate inside the gate. Jay offered to go in, but Hyunsu said that they don't even know where they are now, and there's no point in going inside the gate. Jay replied that if he had any doubts about it, then he would go first, and started to cross the portal. Hyunsu wanted to stop him, but the patriarch stopped him and told him to forget about that brat. Now you can explore the area better. But Hyunsu replied that he couldn't do that because they had come as a team. So he started to cross the gate. As soon as Hyunsu crossed the gate, he immediately began to fall down. The portal was in the wall at the top of the castle. The guy managed to use the heavenly demon flight and climbed to the top of that castle. But Hyunsu couldn't understand where Jay had gone. Then he heard someone grunting and climbing up the wall. It was Jay. He told Hyunsu that he had seen him fly and marveled at his speed. Suddenly they saw a whole city. Jay said he'd been to many places, but this was the first time he'd seen civilization inside the gate. The guys decided to split up, but before they did, Jay handed Hyunsu a red thingy and told him to use it if anything happened. The castle turned out to be quite old. Its appearance didn't inspire confidence. It looked like it was about to collapse. Inside the castle, A skeleton of a man in a red cloak sat on a throne, with a crown and trident in his hands. Meanwhile, the girl watcher informed the man that all the earrings of the Red Lion had been destroyed. The man kept saying he was bored and asked what about Hansu and Ha-Yurak. The girl replied that Hansu is approaching the ancient Entropy Castle and Ha-Yurak is fighting the sea alone. Ha-Yurak meanwhile is brave and courageous, and the girl was destroying the monsters in the sea by herself. She shouted that she would burn every monster alive, and then she would be able to find her people. But the monsters did not become less. They kept coming and coming. She could leave, but the exit was already gone. At this time, Jay was walking on the roof of the castle, but he had the feeling that he was walking in a circle. So he made the decision to walk down the wall. The terrain impressed Jay, and the first thing he did was tell his installed program to find where there might be gems. Hyun-Soo looked around the area at this time, but there were none. The patriarch told him that he sensed something alien and huge. Suddenly, the same skeleton that was sitting on the throne appeared in front of Hyun-Soo. Only now he was 100 times bigger. The skeleton asked Hyun-Soo, "Are they trying to enter the Gate of Light?" Hyun-Soo walked to the inside of the castle, and the skeleton thanked him for accepting his invitation. But the skeleton said he had to ask him something, and asked if they had arrived there through the Gate of Light. Hyun-Soo replied that if he meant the portal, then that's exactly what it was. But the skeleton didn't understand what the portal was. Suddenly, the patriarch tells Hyun-Soo that it seems like he can see it, and the skeleton replies that of course he can see it. The skeleton asks the patriarch if he is a sorcerer controlling souls. Hyun-Soo replies that he's not really. The skeleton then concluded that they were his guests and offered them some tea. The patriarch asked him if he was the king. The skeleton replied that he didn't know, and in fact he remembered everything vaguely. He told his guest that he'd been living for about 283 years, though he'd taken 10 years in a year. Hyun-Soo was surprised that it was more than 2,000 years. The skeleton asked his guests why they didn't drink tea, since they say it can greatly increase mana reserves. He served it because he hadn't had guests for a long time. The patriarch asked if mana was something edible. He suggested if the tea was poisoned, and Hyun-Soo quickly spit out the tea. The patriarch asked the king what happened to the castle because it was so dirty inside. The skeleton said he was glad he could finally talk to someone for that long. He assumed that he was most likely the king of the place. At least he looked appropriate. The king told his guests that this country had been envied by everyone since the beginning. Happiness in this place was guaranteed to those who worked hard. People both worked and lived happily. But one day, suddenly a gate of light began to appear, and from there began to come out all kinds of monsters. Chaos ensued. The skeleton doesn't remember if he was king at the time, but he was pretty sure he could use magic back then. The king then used everything he had to destroy all the monsters. At this time, the girl turned to the man, calling him knight. She said that the gulag had awakened and the fun had begun. That's when he told to gather everyone in one place. Ha-Yurak, meanwhile, was still destroying the monsters in the sea, when suddenly she saw a gate within a gate, from which she saw the very gulag. The skeleton continued his story. He said that he still couldn't destroy all the monsters and woke up already like that. The king doesn't remember what happened to his people, and he told his guests that if they came to kill him to do it right now. The patriarch and Hyun-Soo didn't expect that and asked how they could kill him if he was already dead. Meanwhile, a gulag came out of the gate, along with the guild men who had been killed. Ha-Yurak realized that one portal blocked the other. She finally saw her squad. Ha-Yurak was very embittered. She was determined to destroy this monster for her squad, no matter what it cost her. The girl told Knight that they had finally met and asked him who he would bet on. Knight replied that he would bet on the gulag, of course. Ha-Yurak yelled to the gulag that after everything he did to her squad, she would destroy him. The girl went into Firebird mode, but the gulag was stronger than she thought. He used the strongest technique, and there was an incredible explosion. Ha-Yurak decided that she needed to clear the area. She concentrated and destroyed all the small monsters that were around. Now it was the turn to deal with this huge monster that came out of the gate along with Ha-Yurak's squad. The patriarch at this time was telling the skeleton that it was ridiculous to ask him to kill it. Couldn't he do it himself? Hyun-Soo asked the teacher to be more polite. Then the king asked Hyun-Soo if they were teacher and student, and how could he even choose a soul as his teacher? And then the skeleton raised his trident and struck his head with it. But the king instantly resurrected, He said that he had tried to kill himself many times, but each time he was resurrected. The skeleton told his guests that he no longer remembered exactly what curse he had. He asked only to be deprived of the pain of existence alone. And then the patriarch replied to the king that he would kill him, but only on one condition. Hansu tried to stop the teacher. At this time, Jae went to the door of the castle. He wondered what was inside, but the door wouldn't open so easily. So he decided that the easiest thing to do would be to crack the door and enter. Jae kicked the door open with his magical hand. When he stepped inside, the whole place looked like an ancient structure. On both sides of the stairs were furnished with statues of monsters. But suddenly the statues were alive. Jae didn't expect such a turn at all. It seemed he would have to fight. Meanwhile, the king asked the patriarch if it would be his condition to know how to get out of there. Hansu told the teacher that they just needed to go through the portal they had entered. The teacher slapped him on the back and called him a stupid jerk because the portal was gone. The patriarch reminded him to always keep in mind where the exit from the place he's in is. The skeleton said he didn't know how to get out of there, and if he did, he would have gotten out himself long ago. But the king remembered that he seemed to know what he could do to help them and asked him to follow him. The patriarch told Hansu that he might be up to something and to be on guard. The guy replied that he didn't think the king was going to do anything to them. The king went to the door and started to open it with his mana power. He commanded the door to open, and it opened. Hansu asked what kind of energy it was. It didn't look like the kind of energy the teacher uses. The patriarch replied that he didn't know. He hadn't experienced something like this before. The king told them not to be afraid because he could open that door anytime. He showed them an object and said the name of this marble is entropy. Nothing in the world can compare to it. The skeleton told Hansu to try putting his hand on it, but the king warned that he didn't know what the orb would show him. Perhaps the orb will show him an ordinary day or the birthday of the entire universe, but whatever it is, it will be what Hansu truly desires. The patriarch told the guy to give it a try because it's pointless to doubt anymore. They've already gone too far. Hansu decided to give it a try, but as soon as he put his hands in, the balloon started to pull him in. Hansu started yelling to the teacher that the skeleton had tricked them. The boy tried his best to pull his hands away from the balloon, but it tightened even more. The skeleton began to laugh ironically. With hatred, he said he apologized for the lie. The patriarch asked the skeleton why he did it, and he told him that he just like them wanted to get out of there. He said that after years of searching, he had learned a way to manifest the gate of light, but he didn't have enough energy. When Hansu and the patriarch arrived, the king felt with his intuition that the time had finally come. Hansu shouted that he was a real scumbag. How dare he deceive them when they sincerely trusted? The king explained to him that he had absorbed all the souls of his men and defeated the monsters. But in the end, he was all alone and had no more energy left to gather. And so finally there were guests in his castle. And what guests? With the energy of thousands of people inside him. The skeleton said that he would not even ask where they got such energy from, because it would be his anyway. The patriarch listened to all of this and told the king that he had learned enough of everything he needed to know. He told his disciple to calm down. The teacher told Hansu that did he really think that the martial arts he had taught him wouldn't help him in this situation. The patriarch told him to use the heavenly demon's dominant move. Hansu realized that he was too panicked because he couldn't remove his hands. Hansu started shouting that everything bows before the heavenly demon and used the heavenly demon's dominant step. The skeleton couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't realize what had happened. Hansu freed himself and asked him, how dare he kneel him down? The patriarch praised his disciple and said that this was how every heavenly demon should behave. Hansu used a force-destroying base and then a maiden strike. He was destroying the skeleton. Jae was fighting the monsters at this time, but no matter how many he killed them, there was no end to the monsters. They kept appearing and appearing. He decided it was time to run away. But suddenly Jae fell into a hole with spears sticking out. He was lucky to get a foothold on the wall. Almost died, thought Jae, when he managed to get out of the trap. And then he saw a huge rock in front of him, and with all his energy in his fist, he sprinted to hit the rock. Hansu was fighting the skeleton. He thought he had defeated the king, but the patriarch said he was still alive. Even a direct hit from the tree didn't help. The skeleton resurrected again and told the guy that it wasn't bad, like for a brat like him. But Hansu was just a speck of dust to the skeleton. The patriarch told Hansu to watch his back carefully and not to panic, necessary to turn on the materialization of the heavenly demon. The king shouted to the guy that he was just a slimy slug. Hansu began to apply the flight of the heavenly demon. The patriarch told the skeleton that he was just an insect. How dare he even think that he could pull a heavenly demon? The patriarch told the insect not to try to reach the heavens. After all, the heavens are already in front of him. The skeleton replied that that was too arrogant, because he was just a soulless soul. The king said he would wipe his apprentice into powder and show him that there is always someone stronger in this world. The skeleton destroyed the entire floor of the castle, but Hansu wasn't confused. He realized that even though the king destroyed the entire floor, there were still pillars left. Hansu concentrated his energy and used a seed strike against the skeleton. The guy was already tired of fiddling with those bones. Jay shattered the shell of the huge stone and reached the shining crystal inside. He was going to absorb it. This crystal turned out to be the king's life vessel. Jay realized that the power of this vessel surpassed A rank. Its power was definitely S rank. During the battle with Hansu, the skeleton felt that someone had touched his life vessel. Hansu used all the techniques of the heavenly demon and defeated the skeleton. But the king knew that if someone didn't take his life fragment, he would win. And then Jay suddenly appeared. He was no longer like himself. Incredible strength and power emanated from him. The renewed Jay went back to the monsters. Now he said it would be different. That kind of power was driving him crazy. Jay couldn't get enough of himself. He admired every bit of his body. He could feel his power. Meanwhile, Hansu told his teacher that when he took hold of that ball, he felt countless people's screams run through his body. Hansu made the decision to save all those people in the balloon, but the patriarch couldn't leave him alone. So the teacher decided to go along with him, because if Hansu couldn't do it alone there, the patriarch wouldn't forgive himself. And the patriarch traveled to the balloon. Neither of them had any idea what they would see. And there it was, the city before the destruction. There was harmony and idle. Everyone was minding their own business. But then people noticed the gate of light. Everyone started to run in panic and shouted that they should immediately inform the king. Monsters burst out of the gate. They began to kill civilians. The city was in chaos. The warriors of the kingdom shouted that no one should run away. It is necessary to fight honorably for their families and for the king. And then suddenly the king appeared and ordered everyone to retreat. Now he takes the matter into his own hands. The king, with the honor of Mori and the spirit of Jabagaro that touched the heavens, used a blow from the heavens. He succeeded in defeating the monsters. The people admired and praised their king. The king returned to his chambers completely exhausted. He said that if this continues, at one point he will be destroyed. He no longer had the strength to fight. He knew that no one could stop the monsters from the gate of light but him. What good would this world be if he died? The king came to the conclusion that it only meant that he himself was the land. He realized that he had only one option left. The king began to contemplate necromancy, a sorcery that allows him to harvest people's souls and absorb vast amounts of power. It was as if he was flitting from his bad side to his good side. In a moment, he was already thinking how a country could even be called a country if there were no people in it. The bad side in him said that he needed to use necromancy because people always regather around the one with power in his hands. The good side of him said that this way he would only become a murderer, and that he was definitely crazy. What kind of king would go out of his way to kill his own people? Just then, a man bursts into the room and tells the king that a gate of light has appeared near the eastern wall of the castle. The king couldn't stand it. He got furious at his subordinate and started yelling at him that the only thing they do is whine endlessly. The king asked the man how they were any different from the parasites clinging to him for the sake of prolonging their worthless lives. He promised to give their lives some value and killed the subordinate, saying that their blood would not be spilled in vain. The king wanted to collect all the souls of these men during eternity and gain unprecedented power. In the name of the forbidden god Hammurack, he ordered all the souls in the city to come to him. And suddenly the souls of all the people in the city began to leave their bodies. The souls of children, women, old men, every single one of them. They flew to the king, and he began to consume them. He enjoyed what he felt as he grew stronger with each soul. After being saturated with the souls of his citizens, the king went out to fight the monster from the gate. He knew he wouldn't lose to any more monsters. Meanwhile, Hansu, immersed in that orb, he could hear the scream of every soul present there. It was impossible to bear it. The patriarch shouted to him that he had to endure it. Hansu had to cope, especially since he himself wanted to help these souls. The souls were luring Hansu. They were yelling that he alone had a body there, that he needed to get rid of it and become one of them. Then suddenly a white light appeared in front of the guy. The light told him that he had done a great job. The guy tried to shout to the teacher, but he was nowhere to be found. The white light welcomed the guy to the glowing man. Hansu didn't know who it was and asked the man where he came from. The man stroked Hansu's head and said that he poor guy had suffered so much because of those souls. The old man's touch brought Hansu out of the darkness, and at last he saw the lively city again. And then, looking closely at the man, Hansu recognized the king. The guy started yelling that he was a scumbag and was trying to cheat everyone again. The king replied to the guy that how could he even say that, because the king had waited for this moment for 3,024 days. The king explained that the skeleton wasn't the only one waiting for a strong man to come from the outside world. Hansu replied that the skeleton was saying that he had been waiting for 2,000 years. The king replied that what kind of fool would even believe him. The guy then asked him if he and the skeleton together were the same person. The king replied that they were both yes and no. The king explained that when he used necromancy, he gave up his evil self and immersed himself in anthropy. Simply put, he was thrown out of his own body. This is how he and the skeleton came to be. At this point, the king took control of himself and created a world in another dimension. He was also able to save a few souls that Anthropia absorbed and help them settle here and live on. Even though every day is the same for people here, at least they don't suffer from pain, the king explained. The king marveled at Hansu's ability to listen to instructions. He said that in his 3,000 years, he had never seen anything like this. The boy asked how he knew that. Hansu started to ask the teacher what he should do to the king. Maybe he should hit him. But the king replied that he was the one who called his teacher here. The king told Hansu that his evil side kept the source of life separate from their joint body to live eternal life. But Hansu entered the gate with another person from the outside world, and that person took the vessel of life. Hansu realized that the person in question was Jay. The king said that Jay is now looking for Hansu. He has become another reintegration of evil. Jay was no longer the man he was known to be. The king warned that he would try to kill the guy. Hansu has agreed to cooperate and is willing to listen to instructions from the king. Meanwhile, at the portal entrance, Limina and the people from the association were monitoring the situation. The indicators said that the intensity of the Anderson had risen to 63. Limina realized that all she could do was just wait there and hope that Hansu was okay. Ha-Yurak, meanwhile, continued to fight the monster. She wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. The girl tried her best. She used an attack that she put all her strength into. But the monster didn't die. She didn't realize what kind of degenerate it was. The king at this time told Hansu that he had spent all his strength to create this world, and he would need to learn mana control to free the people. Hansu asked, "What is mana?" The king explained that Hansu uses ki energy, which is the purified energy of nature, and mana is the raw energy of nature. The king told Hansu to absorb mana energy in its pristine form. The guy activated listening to the instructions. Hansu instantly absorbed and studied the mana. The king marveled at such an ability. He didn't understand how such a thing was possible. The king admired the guy. Hansu had a mana breath after only 3 hours. The king thought he was a genius. Hansu said he could feel the mana and asked what he should do next. The king said that now you have to take control of all the souls inside this body. The king warned the guy that he will most likely feel the pain of each soul. Hansu just needs to take back all their pain. The guy listened to all the instructions and got down to business. And that's when Jay came up to him. Jay started calling out to Hansu, but the guy didn't respond. Jay said he was sorry because he wanted to see what he could do. Hansu started to feel like his heart was about to burst. He needed to be careful because there would be no second chance. The king told Hansu to put mana into every word he said, and say the word disappear. Hansu uttered the word, and the orb shattered into small shards. The souls were finally freed. The patriarch saw the vengeful spirits disappear. He was proud that his disciple had done this. Suddenly, the king appeared behind the patriarch's back. He told the patriarch that his disciple had accomplished a great feat. Now he and his men were finally free. The king said that he would be grateful to the patriarch if he would tell Hansu that they had gained their freedom because of him. Hansu came to his senses and saw Jae in front of him. Jae told him that it was great that he was awake because it was boring to kill him like that. Jae aimed a strong energy ball straight at Hansu. He wished with all his heart to destroy him. Hansu's response didn't last long. Jae missed the strike and realized that with that much power, he wouldn't be able to keep up with him. Jae got angry and started shouting that he was the strongest since he had gained S rank. He wanted to show Hansu his power. Hansu felt Jae's skeleton strength. He realized that Jae had really absorbed his energy. In that case, Hansu simply couldn't let him go. Now all he had to do was fight. Even though Jae was a strong opponent, Hansu was able to defeat his opponent with incredible strength and speed. Hansu told his teacher that he was overflowing with energy. The mana power that the king had taught him was synergizing with his internal energy. Hansu realized that in this state, he could defeat even Haxin if he came to his soul again. The patriarch recognized this too. He told the guy that the power he felt in him was comparable to the highest peak level from the world where the patriarch lived before. But this all had one downside. Mana couldn't be used and stored for as long as key energy. Suddenly, a gate appeared in the sky above Hansu. He saw Ha-Yurak fighting a huge monster inside the gate. Meanwhile, Knight checked with the girl if the skeleton lost in the battle with Hansu. The girl confirmed the information. Then Knight said that if the Gulag loses to Ha-Yurak, the place will be destroyed even though they tried to avoid that outcome with all their might. Knight became furious and said the Gulag would never lose, even if the two sides of the king reunited. There was no way they would be able to defeat it. He informed the girl that while the main battle was going on, he would take care of the rest of the bugs that weren't as important. At this time, Hansu didn't understand what was going on, how a bunch of portals were trying to come together in one place. The patriarch said it seems from inside that portal they started the journey. The teacher explained to Hansu that the phenomenon of portals and other portals is called overlapping. Suddenly, a girl allied with Knight appeared behind Hansu's back. She told Hansu that he was upsetting Knight by his existence. The patriarch told the guy that this girl made him feel bloodthirsty. She decided to send Hansu a heart, but before she could even move, Hansu already flew back. The girl noticed that he was so fast that there was even a residual image left behind. The patriarch became proud of his disciple. He asked Hansu if he used mana to instantly increase his strength. The fight started. Hansu used a seed kick, but the girl blocked the kick with a regular umbrella. Hansu thought she was just mocking him. The girl told him that he was such a terrible person, and how could he even do that to a weak girl like her? Hansu used the heavenly demon flight technique. The girl was surprised by such a unique movement technique. Hansu shouted at her to answer why she attacked him. The girl said that she didn't have to explain anything to him. Hansu started to use the tree kick, but the girl only taunted him and yelled that he couldn't get her. The girl lured Hansu to Knight's house. She apologized to Knight and said that she underestimated the guy. Knight turned to Hansu and said that all he had to do was exhaust the skeleton. Hansu asked who he even was. Knight continued that at least he had those plans for Hansu. The guy asked again who the man was. Knight replied that he didn't need to worry about that since he was going to die soon anyway. So he attacked Hansu. However, after fighting Hansu for only a couple of minutes, Knight realized that the man was really very strong and fast. But Knight managed to throw Hansu off the cliff. The guy started flying into the cliff. There were peaks at the bottom, which Hansu fell on. At this time, Ha-Yurak was still fighting with the monster. He suddenly shouted out, "Gulag!" Ha-Yurak realized that it was most likely his name, and he was quite serious about the battle. Ha-Yurak applied the Firebird mode and said that it didn't matter which one of them died, but they should know the name of the one by whose hand they fell. Ha-Yurak gave her name to the Gulag and said that she swore on the name of her fallen comrades that she would destroy him. Ha-Yurak shouted that most S-ranks have techniques that will take their lives in exchange for incredible strength, techniques that used life force as fuel. The girl dared to use such a technique. Ha-Yurak assembled a real atomic bomb in her body and said that the plasma would now incinerate everything. At this time, the association ship reported that the density of the Anderson was already 85, and it was only increasing. Limina felt like the portal was about to explode. She thought that if even the S-ranks couldn't stop it, then they didn't stand a chance. At this time, the girl received a call from the head of the department. Limina told him that she didn't think they could make it through. Limina reported that there was no word from the portal yet. She asked what they should do next if there were no reinforcements. However, the department head told the girl not to worry because someone was already rushing to help. Suddenly, the girl noticed someone flying towards their ship at an incredible speed. When he landed, Limina recognized him. The request from Korea came to the ES Guild. When it happened, Jill asked Huxon if he was going to accept the request. Takashi reminded Huxon that he would then have to help Hayurak, whom he hates so much. Huxon said that he would only help if there was no way they could do without him. If they find someone else, he'll stay home. Jill and Takashi reminded him that hunters were needed to save people. It was their calling in life. Huxon set off to help, and Jill and Takashi also made the decision that they couldn't fall behind. Limina told Huxon that right now the Anderson density in the portal is very high, and it's possible the portal will explode in 30 minutes. She also informed him that there were 30 A-rank hunters and the head of the Red Lion Guild, Hayurak, in the portal right now. Jill and Takashi then arrived on the ship. Limina realized that there was still hope for them to escape. Huxon asked if Hansu was inside the portal. The girl replied that he was there too. Huxon thanked her for the information. Huxon thought that if that kid is inside, it should be okay. He knew Hyun had more than just abilities. Meanwhile, Hayurak finished creating the plasma sword that she was going to use to blast everything around her. As the patriarch watched from the side, he realized that Hayurak was using her crowning technique. He couldn't believe that she had such powerful energy under her control. At this time, Hyun-soo came to his senses. He thought that if he hadn't managed to gather mana and ki together in time, and strengthened with this defense, he would be dead by now. But even with this preparation, Hyun-soo had taken a huge amount of damage. Seeing the guy, the patriarch asked why he was covered in blood. Hyun-soo asked him not to ask any questions yet, and asked what was inside the portal. The patriarch told him that Hayurak is trying to finish the battle. At this time, Knight flew up and told Hyun-soo, how dare he get distracted during the battle. The patriarch told the guy to use the Inyan demon. However, Knight's attacks could not be predicted. The patriarch prompted the disciple to use a leaf strike to block. Hyun-soo began to gain the upper hand. Knight sensed the danger. He realized that he needed to dodge this technique somehow. Hayurak had almost reached her limit. A little more, and she would be ready to release her energy. Hayurak made a strike, and completely exhausted fell down into the abyss. She didn't have any power left at all. During her fall, she remembered one of her battles and her captain. The captain was telling her that she had done a great job and had done well. The captain reminded the girl that she would soon become an S-rank, but for now she needed to watch his back. He asked Hayurak that if anything happens to him, that she should take care of his son Jae, even though he's still an underdog. Hayurak asked the captain not to talk nonsense, because nothing could happen to him, but still made a promise. And so at the moment of her fall, Hayurak apologized to her captain for not being able to keep her promise. At this time, the girl shouted to Knight that the Gulag portal was closing off. Knight replied that he knew and asked her to keep quiet. Just then, Knight cut the portal with his sword. This was the first time Hyun-soo had seen that. Knight said he wondered how Hyun-soo had managed to hold on for so long. Knight tells Hyun-soo that he doesn't know if Hyun-soo can survive today, but he promises that if he does and they meet again, then Knight will appear before him in his true form, and then Hyun-soo won't survive for sure. Knight disappeared and Hyun-soo yelled at him for being a coward. The patriarch told him not to exert himself so much because Knight was gone. Hyun-soo asked his teacher what he should do next since he can't stay here. The patriarch told him to turn around and look at the sword that Knight left behind. The teacher told Hyun-soo that this place would close soon, and one should swing the sword just like Knight did. Hyun-soo didn't know what he should do. The patriarch said he needed to pour internal energy into the sword right now. Hyun-soo injected internal energy, but nothing came out of it. He needed to make a decision right away. Then the guy tried to infuse mana into it, but just as he tried to swing his sword, he was knocked down by the water. The patriarch saw that his disciple was so weakened that even the water was able to knock him down. However, Hyun-soo managed to grasp and swung his sword once more, Finally, the portal opened and Hansu jumped into it. The guy found himself in the same desert they had originally fallen into. Now it was left to figure out how to proceed. In the portal above him, Hansu saw that place flooded with water. The patriarch explained that it had now merged with the place where Ha-Yurak had fought. But as soon as Hansu heard that the guild leader was still there, he made the decision to return there immediately. The guy swung his sword to cut the portal and go to Ha-Yurak's aid. He couldn't do otherwise. Meanwhile, Knight returned to his kingdom. He was badly injured, and the girl offered to change his form, but he refused. Then she thought that Knight didn't change his clothes even though he was injured so much. Is his promise to the king so important? Knight read her thoughts, freaked out, and started yelling that the king was a being beyond reverence and fear. Knight didn't even notice the change of guise. He said that no one would ever dare to disobey the king's orders. The healers came and said that they would start the treatment and by tomorrow everything would be fine. Knight thought it was a shame that the skeleton king was dead, but if the overlapping portal collapsed, it would be a sight to behold. Knight hoped that they would meet Hansu again, but he didn't understand why the information about Hansu's abilities and his actual strength were so different. Just then, a recovery potion was brought to him. Knight asked if the king was interested in it. He was told that he wasn't, but the rook was with him now. Knight didn't understand why the rook was there. And then it was explained to him that if the plan went wrong, Knight's punishment would be death. Knight beckoned the girl over to him and said that now was a good time, and he was sure that everyone was only shaking about the fragments. The girl asked if he wanted to start the search. He replied that the portal explosion didn't matter now. He would be the first to find the fragments and make the rook bow to him. Knight ordered, urgently telling the pawn to start searching, and they would find the singularity. A girl named Nim watched the battle and said there was nothing funnier than this. She learned that Hansu was strong too, but she couldn't believe that stupid Knight didn't notice the singularity right under his nose. Nim knew that Knight thought his plan had worked, but he had no idea about anything and was going crazy trying to find the singularity. She couldn't wait to see the attack. It was even more fun for her than watching the battle. Just then an unknown man came up to her and told her that they had found him. Nim told her to show him quickly. The girl was so excited to see him, but the man reminded her that he was already dead. She sighed and said that she even gave Jay the bracelet, but he still lost to Hansu. The man asked what he should do next. Nim said that since he absorbed the vessel, he could still be useful, so she ordered him to take it with him. They took Jay's body and headed into the portal. Nim said that she had faith in Hansu and that he would be able to find the oasis. At this time, Hansu was trying to get into the dimension where Ha-Yurak was left. He swung his sword, went through the portal, but still ended up in the same desert. The patriarch told him not to despair and try a few more times, but there wasn't much time left. Meanwhile, the city was showing breaking news, saying that right now the gate that had appeared in the Western Sea was close to exploding. Panic gripped the people. They didn't know what to expect if the gate exploded again, but they knew that the Red Lion was already there, so all they had to do was wait. Yoon decided to visit Hansu's brother. She started to tell him that his brother had become one of those who enter the gate to save others. The girl asked Hyuntae to wake up because Hansu was very upset about his brother being bedridden. Yoon's baby brother and sister started making noise, and she had to pick up the babies and leave the ward. But Yoon promised that she would be back soon. At this time, Hansu again went into the desert through the portal. The patriarch couldn't understand what was wrong either. They were just winding circles in the desert. Suddenly Hansu saw an oasis in front of him. He thought it was very strange, and the patriarch was also surprised. Hansu went to the water, but there was no reflection at all. Then the guy decided to touch the water, but it wasn't water. Hansu assumed that it was a disguised portal. The patriarch also allowed this possibility. So Hansu and his teacher decided to cross the portal and began to dive into the water. Hansu wakes up in his bed and thinks what a wonderful dream he had. He goes into the kitchen and sees his father. His father says something funny, but Hansu doesn't hear it. Hansu's mother asked her husband not to be too rude. The father replied that he was just kidding. Hyuntae was eating a burger and said that if Hansu slept for 24 hours, it was more like hibernation. Hansu told his brother not to be cocky and took his favorite burger away from him. Hyuntae got angry and started yelling at him to give his burger back immediately. Then Hansu gave him a bill and told him that he was paid yesterday. Hansu then went into his parents' room and asked them what they would like to eat today. His parents said they were pleased and would decide together tonight. The whole family got in the car and went about their business. There was a particularly big traffic jam on the roads that day. Then the father thought they could make a small detour and take a country road. They got to the country road, and Hansu said that it was really better there. His father replied that no navigator could compare to a road veteran. And then Hyuntae notices some bright glow in the sky. He asked Hansu what it was. They assumed it was probably lightning. It was a portal, and a huge monster appeared and attacked the car Hyunsu's family was riding in. After all this horror, Hyunsu woke up in the hospital. He didn't understand what was going on and tried to remember all the details. He started screaming where his family was. The doctors ran up and told the guy that his parents were dead and his brother was in a coma. Then the day of the funeral came. Hyunsu was taking it all very hard. His heart felt like it was being torn apart. He fell down near the ashes of his parents and began to sob loudly. But then he heard someone shouting his name, telling him to come to his senses. Hyunsu woke up and noticed his teacher beside him. The patriarch told him that he didn't wake up and he had to go to extreme measures. Suddenly, Hyunsu saw a stranger in front of him. He said it was some amazing variable. It was strange that it was an otherworldly being. The unknown man said that he only summoned one person, and he doesn't understand why it came out like that. The patriarch called Hyunsu a jerk and asked what kind of dream he had that made him cry so hard. Hyunsu remembered that it was just a dream and exhaled. The patriarch then told the guy to never dare to cry in dreams because it's not permissible for a heavenly demon. Then the unknown man turned to them and said that if they were going to intentionally ignore him. Before he could finish speaking, the patriarch swung his hand and shut him up. The patriarch told the stranger not to dare lift a finger until he gave him permission. Then Hyunsu asked the teacher if he could really attack the man. And the patriarch explained that as soon as he saw him, he immediately realized that his attack would reach him. The teacher said that it didn't work with the skeleton because he had belonged to the physical world for quite a long time. The good side of the king, on the other hand, was a pure spirit like the patriarch himself. And it wasn't the patriarch who attacked him because there was no reason for it. The stranger said that if the patriarch succeeded in destroying him, he would recognize that he had great power. The man didn't think he would ever meet someone so outstanding. The man recognized the patriarch's power and apologized to him for this ridiculous situation. He said that a year ago, people almost managed to kill him, and now he can't use his power like before. Plus now he has to keep this world going. Hyunsu started screaming that he was the reason he had this horrible dream about his past. The man said that he seemed to be pushing the hurt and called the guy by name. Hyunsu then wondered how he knew him, or if he could read other people's minds too. The man replied that of course he can, and this place was designed so that everyone has similar dreams when they enter it. The man explained that these are the sweetest and the most horrible dreams that people can never wake up from. This is how the man gets the vessel, that is, the body of his victim. But he confessed that he originally wanted to call Ha-Yurak, but he was the first to reach the desert. Hyunsu got really angry. The guy started yelling that who was he to steal people's bodies and took a swing at the man. Hyunsu gathered his energy into a fist and threw a punch. But his hand went through the man's body. The patriarch started yelling that his attack wouldn't work and to get out of there immediately. But Hyunsu didn't make it in time. The guy realized that the scumbag had now moved into his body. The man inside the guy was saying that for such a weak soul, his strong body was useless. The man had squeezed Hyunsu's soul out of his body. Now the guy could only watch him being used. The man said it was worth it to wait a whole year. He really liked his new body. He began to feel the residual mana, and the energy of this body gave him incredible pleasure. The patriarch realized that this man was a spellcaster who stole other people's bodies, and he told him that when he was in Murima, such spellcasters were burned on fires. The patriarch then used one of his techniques, banished the caster from the boy's body. The boy could not believe his eyes that the patriarch could interfere with other people's bodies. The patriarch said it was a mystery to him too. Perhaps that was what he was there to learn. He told the caster to be ready to die since he dared to challenge him. But Hyunsu stopped the teacher and said that if he killed the caster, they could be stuck there forever. The patriarch replied that after the death of the creator, the place should also collapse. And if it doesn't, Hyunsu can die. Hyunsu said that the sword no longer obeys him, and killing the caster doesn't guarantee they can create a portal. The caster started laughing loudly. The patriarch got angry and asked what was making him laugh so hard. Then the caster said that by doing many calculations, he had managed to figure out that today at last he would be able to leave this place. But he couldn't believe what was happening. The caster decided to introduce himself properly. He said that his name was Pavlician. He also said that they might know him by his ancestral dragon name. Hansu was surprised because Hayurak said that the ancestral dragon was sealed a year ago. Pavlician explained that it was because he made them believe it. He even used soul language on them. Being on the verge of death, he was infirm, but he was thinking about his brilliant plan again. Pavlician said that he was the one who spread the fragments and hid himself there, waiting for the day when someone would find the place. He also said that his time was coming to an end, and he would be gone by tomorrow. He had a perfect plan in which Hayurak would come to this place. He would take her body and finally turn the entire outside world into chaos. But now an unbelievable being had gotten involved in all of this, something that was beyond his calculations. The patriarch asked the caster why he was so eager to get his hands on other people's worlds. The caster told him that the world he lived in was utterly desolate. It was difficult for mana to exist in it. The caster continued that when he was ready to accept his fate, a certain someone offered him a deal. Hansu asked who exactly had offered the deal. The caster replied that they called themselves kings. The caster then asked if Hansu, even after fighting Night, still didn't understand what was going on. He explained that if Night turns to his true form, he will become stronger than the king before he split into a good side and a bad side. The spellcaster continued that the skeleton and Night only fought him half-heartedly, and Hansu had to wonder that if he had so much trouble with Night, then meeting the king, he would die the second he met him. The spellcaster went on to say that the kings had taught him how to create portals, and he could connect parts of his world to the earth. But because of the humans, it wasn't easy. He thought that as long as humans existed, he would have a hard time connecting their worlds. So the caster created this plan. When the humans thought they had killed him, he split the portal into fragments. He said that everything that happened next they already knew. Now it was already his time. The spellcaster acknowledged that he was honored to meet such an outstanding master as the patriarch. He turned to the patriarch and told him that although he had not succeeded with his plan, he was sure there was a special reason. The caster said that it was time for him to go to the other world, but he hadn't closed the passage, so they needed to get out of there as soon as possible. In parting, he gave Hansu's advice that the guy should take a deeper mana breath on his way out. As soon as Hansu plunged into the portal, his mana amount increased exponentially. The guy couldn't even unclench his eyes from the pressure. He needed to recycle the mana. Hansu was now able to create internal mana energy. His body began to transform to endure the immense power. It reminded Hansu of when the Time Master cleared his meridians for him. However, the guy jumped to conclusions. After just a second, it reminded him of receiving his heavenly demon body. But this wasn't the first time Hansu had experienced such a thing. He would be able to endure it. After going through all the stages of transformation, experiencing incredible pain, and enduring it all, Hansu reached the peak of the three-flower blossom. Meanwhile, the patriarch passing through the portal fell into a place that was incomprehensible to him. He didn't understand what the tricks were. The patriarch said that the ancestral dragon was definitely no more. So who had summoned it here? He said there was no point in hiding anymore. But no one answered the patriarch's questions. Then the patriarch thought that as long as his disciple wasn't there, he could go wild. So he started smashing the energy wall. After a few blows, someone started yelling for the patriarch to stop and offered to talk. The patriarch asked who was there, but the unknown person replied that he would not recognize him even if he told him. Then the patriarch decided if that was the case, it was worth throwing a couple more punches, but he was again asked to stop. The patriarch told him to introduce himself, but the stranger replied that he could not. The patriarch then asked if he couldn't, or if he just didn't want to. The stranger said the second. The patriarch asked who he was, and why he had called him there. The stranger again replied that he couldn't tell him, but the only thing the stranger said was that the patriarch was just curious about him, and he wanted to meet him once. This simply drove the patriarch out. At that time, the patriarch applied the dominant move of the heavenly demon. The stranger couldn't get enough of him, saying that for an old man, he was simply unbelievable. The patriarch wondered why such similar scum thought they could approach him without revealing themselves. Meanwhile, Hansu had completed a complete transformation of his body. He was now hundreds of times stronger, faster, and more powerful. Hansu landed in the same place where Ha Yurak was fighting. But suddenly, the patriarch flew towards him. The patriarch was surprised that he was able to become more powerful again in such a short period of time. Hansu said that they needed to find Ha Yurak. The patriarch said he didn't feel her presence there, and suggested they fly around and find her. Hansu himself didn't expect that he could fly now. The patriarch explained that he needed to release a huge amount of energy, and everything would work out. Hansu gathered all the energy in his acupuncture points, released the right amount of energy, and finally flew. At this time, the news in the city was saying that the Anderson density at the gate over the Western Sea called Fragment of Heaven had exceeded 90 points. There were also kilometer-long traffic jams forming at the exit of the city from those trying to leave the epicenter of a possible gate explosion. The anchors stated that usually if the density of the gate exceeds 90, the explosion happens immediately, and at this moment, the condition of the gate is rated as critical. Meanwhile, Hansu along with his teacher were flying around looking for Ha Yurak. Hansu told the patriarch that he should have told him earlier that he could fly. However, the patriarch replied that if he had said it, Hansu would still be unable to do it. Suddenly, Hansu notices the head of the guild on one of the rocks. She was lying completely still. Hansu asked the teacher how he should land. The patriarch replied that he just needed to reduce the amount of energy released. But Hansu didn't calculate the amount and started slamming into the water. And towards the end, he crashed into a rock. The patriarch said that he just turned into a pancake because he just couldn't control the power. But Hansu's attention was only on the guild head. Hansu didn't understand what happened to Ha Yurak and why her hair color changed. The patriarch said that she seemed to have had quite the battle. He assumed that her opponent was very strong. Meanwhile, on the association ship, Anderson's density was estimated at 95 points. No one understood why it hadn't exploded yet. Suddenly, everyone on the ship noticed something coming out of the portal. Everyone was ordered to prepare for battle. Suddenly, everyone saw Hansu coming out of the portal with Ha Yurak in his arms. The gate began to disappear. Hansu completed the raid. Limi Na saw Hansu and rushed to meet him. The girl was very happy that he survived. Limi Na told Hansu that it was a real relief for her, and that she was really worried that something would happen to him. But Hansu replied that the guild head should be taken care of first. Limi Na was shocked. She didn't even immediately recognize Ha Yurak. Limi Na said that she hardly recognized the guild head. Her hair color had changed. But the girl also noticed that Hansu had physically changed as well. Hansu felt like he had received something great. He now knew that he was a different person and would never be the same. Suddenly, Haxan came up to Hansu and said that he had gotten noticeably stronger. Hansu didn't expect to see him there. Hansu reminded Haxan that he still had a restraining order against approaching him. Haxan asked Hansu what had happened inside the portal. Hansu replied that he's a regular guild member, so he can't divulge details. Haxan told him that he may be a normal guild member, but he's not a normal hunter, that's a fact. Hansu replied that it's different. Haxan was surprised he didn't deny it. The guy said he's learned a lot about himself, and now he's changed. Haxan said he wished he could experience it. If only there was a chance, of course. Hansu might have said yes, but he was stopped by Limi Na. So Hansu replied to Haxan that he wouldn't today. And Haxan said goodbye until next time. Hansu advised him to prepare for that day. Haxan flew away, and Takashi told Hansu that even though he acts like this, he's pretty trustworthy. Takashi explained to Hansu that Haxan put all his business aside and only rushed there because hunters exist to protect humanity. Takashi also said that he personally came to keep his promise, but he didn't help much. Hansu said that in that case, he would keep his promise until it was really needed. Jill shouted to Hansu that he could call them anytime, and they drop everything they were doing and rush over at the same moment. When Jill and Takashi left too, Limi Na thought that they must be very good people. At this time, the S-ranked Hunter Raven, who is ranked number 1 in the Hunter rankings, also being the chairman of the Gate Committee, heard the news about Hansu again. A girl named Sherry entered Raven's room and reported that the hunters had handled the raid. Raven said that he had already been informed and immediately apologized to the girl for his appearance. He didn't want her to see his horrible scar. The girl wasn't the least bit embarrassed by it. She even said she was sure he was the Singularity Network. Raven said he thought so too. Sherry then helped him pick out a tie and suggested a red one. Raven said that a second Singularity would be joining them soon. The girl replied that she really hoped so. Raven remembered that 2 years ago on the day of the fall their capture squad had seen an image of hope and great evil that would appear in the future. Also in that image, 3 singularities appeared before them that would fight against him. Raven told Sherry that he had to go to Korea right away. The girl asked if he would personally go there. Raven replied that it would be better because if they made the move first, it would turn out to be a headache. The girl replied that she would definitely contact Anderson. Suddenly Isaac, who was the first singularity, appeared. He said that he would also go, and how could Teacher Raven forget about him? At this time, there were rallies against the government in the city. People were shouting slogans that they had the right to know the truth. One of the leaders was shouting that their government was blindly relying on the awakened and doing nothing. The patriarch watched the news, and it said that this time it was the same again, and if the Red Lions were gone, Korea would have ceased to exist long ago. The patriarch didn't understand why people were doing this and what they were unhappy about since they had saved them anyway. Hansu explained that it was because everyone has the right to know. The patriarch then asked what would it change? Hansu replied that they still want to know. And then Hansu catches sight of the portal from which the patriarch appeared. And the guy said he's seen many portals before, but never one so black. Hansu realized that it could be an open field of monsters and wondered if he could report the association. But the patriarch said they might still need him. The patriarch informed the guy that he was now ready and could finally learn the remaining 6 techniques. Hansu was surprised because his teacher had flatly refused to show him the techniques before. The patriarch explained that it was because they were different from the first 6 techniques. It was useless to show them. While the first 6 techniques are based on Earth, the other 6 are martial arts that use Earth as a base. The patriarch continued. The patriarch told Hansu that he was able to somehow utilize the heavenly spiritual body with the skill he had. But would Hansu be able to explain what the technique was? The patriarch asked him. Hansu realized that he really had never thought about it, so he was thankfully willing to listen to his teacher's instruction. But the patriarch stopped him and said that they should eat fried rice with marinated pork first. Raven checked with Anderson, the head of scientific affairs of the gate, to see if everything would be all right. Raven told Anderson that while he didn't doubt him, after all, who would they trust with the brains of the awakened if not him? Anderson said that it was still a test product, and it might be worth asking Lord Demon. Raven replied that he didn't really want to meet him, especially if he found out he was trying to copy his technology. He would be very angry. Anderson laughed and said that he would rather sue him, and asked him to bring some fried chicken back from Korea. Raven asked him to keep an eye on Isaac. Anderson was surprised, since there's Sherry for that. But Raven said he doesn't listen to anyone except those who are stronger than he is. A troubled enough brat, Anderson replied. But he promised to keep a close eye on him. But then Isaac suddenly walked in and asked who was the troublemaker, reminding him that he had said he was going to. Raven started yelling that it was too early for him. Isaac was pissed off by this. He didn't realize how early it was if the only one stronger than him was a high-ranked S-ranked hunter. Raven said he didn't mean his strength. Isaac asked if it was all about damn etiquette again. Anderson interjected and said he might actually take him along. Maybe he could learn some sort of etiquette by practicing. Isaac asked his teacher to believe in him at least a little bit. Besides, Korea is famous for its upbringing. Isaac still managed to break Raven, and he agreed to take him with him, but on the condition that the boy would not leave his side. Meanwhile, Hansu was preparing to practice the remaining 6 techniques with the patriarch. The patriarch noticed that Hansu had changed a lot and was very different. The patriarch asked his disciple who he thought the heavenly demons were. The question put Hansu in a stupor. Hansu replied that he couldn't say for sure, but based on the name, they were demons that came down from heaven. The patriarch said he was partly right. Suddenly, they were interrupted by energy from outside the portal. Hansu had to leave the portal immediately. Raven was standing at his door.